The VSCA Daytona 24 was full of plenty of sprint-like moments. Tonight, it's all sprint-like moments as we swing out west to the streets of California. Welcome to the SportsCar Grand Prix of Long Beach and to round number 2 of the Virtual Sports Car Association SportsCar Championship in 2026. My name is Ola Ramble alongside Ron Mounds, and we are bringing you all of racing action from start to finish here on Saturday afternoon. Ron, we swing out to round number 2, and it could not be a more different venue from the World Center of Racing. From the high banks of Daytona and those long, long straights down to the slowest track of the season, and arguably the tightest as well. It is a true test of drivers' endurance this afternoon.
We really could not be farther removed from Daytona geographically and otherwise. Long Beach is one of the most, if not the most storied street course in all of the United States. Frankly, one of the most storied in the entirety of the world. This track has played host to some absolutely incredible events over the years. Started off as a Formula 5000 event, then became part of the F1 calendar. It switched off to being an IndyCar race. It's still an IndyCar race to this day, and IMSA runs their races here every single year. This is going to be a bull ring race, and with the sprint race being the first one of the year, everybody still is getting the juices flowing to get the season up and rolling here in 2026. So I feel like this is maybe going to be one where people will just be happy to see the checkered flag.
I could not put it better myself. I mean, this is really one of those racetracks where you could argue it's going to be more about concentration this afternoon. Daytona, one of those tracks where you can kind of just sit down, get into a rhythm. No, definitely not the case here, though. You cannot afford so much as an instant and a lapse of concentration, because instead of an off-track 1X, that means putting your car into the wall and very much out of the race here this afternoon. One of the big stories coming into this season is, of course, that all the classes will have one race taken out of their calendar, so nobody will be running the full race every single season. But the big one, LMP2's not running here today, and that could be critical because it was in 2024 some of the LMP2 runners that cost a couple of the full course yellows back a couple years ago. And with the LMP2s not present this afternoon, that means it's a straight-up brawl between the GTPs and the GT3s.
And talking about Daytona and Long Beach being two different ends of the racetrack spectrum, GTPs and GT3s pretty far apart too. Much different power output, much different way that these cars are meant to compose one another. However, there is one point that they are going to merge. It's on those out-laps for the GTPs. We see it a lot in sports car racing, those GTPs with the freezing cold, ice cold tires. Trying to get the juices flowing in those cars can be very tricky when you come out of the pits here at Long Beach as well. Keep an eye on turn number 1 and heading your way through that pit exit. That is going to be a real tough test for these racers here today. And taking a look at our season calendar, we have got pretty much every single kind of known sports car venue, every single track that we're going to be visiting so far this season. Yes, including Homestead has played host to some IMSA or some Grand Am or ALMS races before. This is an awesome calendar here for 2026.
The only thing we're missing is, of course, the back 2 races, of course, this season being capped off by a Petit Le Mans at the tail end of things. But this race kicks off the Sprint Cup. We had the Endurance Cup started off just last month at Daytona for the McConaughey Setup Shop, 24 Hours of Daytona. Today, it'll be for the drivers contending for the Sprint Cup that will be taken to the racetrack. And obviously that Sprint Cup, it is one that is always exciting. It's one that can swing back and forth like a pendulum, and I find that at least in the Sprint Cup, it tends to be a lot less predictable who could be coming out on top of the championship.
And you usually think that the opposite would be true, being like, oh yeah, 24-hour long race, this is going to be pretty easy to nail down. But these sprint races, these drivers can get wild. We were talking about it a little bit before we went on the air, weren't we, Nolan? And even as we've been on the air thus far, about the sort of craziness that we expect here in this race with a condensed format. 2 hours and 40 minutes may seem like a lot of time in the grand scheme of things, but compared to the rest of the races this season, it is a quick dash to the end. So this is going to be real tough. Everybody wants to start off this season on a high note, start off this Sprint Cup part of this season on a high note as well. So we're going to see a level of aggression that we probably didn't see last time at Daytona.
And all of this will take us to the end of the warm-up session, the drivers' meeting coming to a close. And with that, It is high time that we take a rundown of who's going to be starting where when we go racing for the main event here this afternoon. So 2 hours and 40 minutes about to kick off in earnest. And that means that it is time to run down through the GTP starting grid. Starting on pole position this afternoon, it's going to be Tiago Mello for Bravo Snow Shafton alongside Danny Fonte for the World of Sim Racing team, with the second row on the grid holding JD Dan of Pack Simsport alongside Nicholas Pedersen for Wastegate Racing. Row 3 holds Felipe Sonner for Delta Racing. He's alongside Lucas Moncla for Twinturn SR by Rebecca Bornheim, with the fourth row holding Sergio Lazer for VSR Competición and Andre Vitor Diaz for Delta Racing. Top 10 closed out by Joel Diaz for No Limit Sim Racing Academy alongside Jordi Vermeulen for BMW M Team TSR. The 13-car GTP field headed up by Miguel Ruiz for Red Lab Competición, Mark Skirshell for Albrecht Motorsports, and Visual Motorsports' Damian Benke bringing up the tail end of the field. And Ron, you've got the GT Pros.
Yeah, and we've got a stacked field of GT competitors. Up at the front is Peter Spinchkaman in the SimCity Racing number 71 car. He'll be alongside Sergi Martinez-Duran in the VSR Competición car. Looking on row number 2 in our GT3 field, it's going to be Ian Lawrence Brown alongside Thomas Silva in the number 77 car. Looking right behind it, Sean Hatfield alongside Bernardo Silva. Those two racers making up row number 3. And then right behind, rounding out your top 8, will be Christian Marinchek in the Matco Fisher Motorsports entry alongside Timothy Johnson in that car right there. It is Adrian Sabella in the 151 starting this race in 9th, with Travis Liskon Hatfield rounding out your top 10 in the GT3 Pros. Jack Hedscox alongside Errol Yuskov in the number 66 car there in P11 and P12. Looking right behind, we've got Jan Zikolas starting this race in P13 next to Chris Triber in P14. And then right behind them on our 8th row here will be Nuno Vinarge alongside Marco Silva. And then just a few more racers left to go by here, and that is our GT3 AMs.
Tim McLeish brings it up for SRI Motorsports in the AM category alongside Yanis Constantine, with the second row headed up by Lucas Santos for Vulture Motorsports alongside Nicholas Goen for Goen Racing. Row 3 holding Richard Bell for SR Motorsports alongside Jason Brothers for SWF Motorsports, with row 4 holding Diego Rodriguez for Frida Sport alongside John Santoro for the Superstar Racing Team. Back to the field, Chris Cadiz for BMW M Team TSR alongside Thomas Spence for Rentley SRT. And they are headed up, of course, by Jason Keddy for Flight Level Racing alongside Will Robertson for the Wastegate Racing crew. Back through the field, only a couple more rows to go, as Claudio DeSanto for Wolf Motorsports Simerson alongside Matthew Elia for Off of the SS Racing, with the top 16 headed up by Ryan Steinhoff and Intercop Fisher Motorsports alongside Ben Winter for Blocco Motore Simsport. And that is it then. Your grid is set, and they are making their way around this racetrack one final time before we get to the green flag this afternoon. So we can talk a little bit about the challenges of Long Beach. Now, they're going to be starting this race after the start-finish line, give these guys a chance to get doubled up out of that final hairpin, but they're going to have to get single file quick, because this fountain section, never one to be trifled with.
Yeah, this fan section, one of the later alterations made to this circuit. I mentioned towards the top of the show how storied Long Beach is. It's had many alterations made to it through the years. I always thought that this had just been the only layout that it had ever used, but this fan section and that entire run around the aquarium was only added back in 1999. And in the early days, they'd even allow you to run off into the flowers. They just had pure concrete walls on either side of you. Very claustrophobic back then, still claustrophobic now, especially on the first lap. These drivers in both the GTPs and the GT3s going to have a real test on their hands to try and negotiate that section on the first lap of the race. One turn, though, that I'm going to be keeping my eyes on is a few turns after that. It's turn number 5, the slightly canted off-camber right-hander that's kind of medium speed, really tricky to nail down, especially towards the start of this race on the cold tires. But even when the juices are flowing, that's going to be a tough task for these racers throughout today's action.
You talk about being able to send drivers into the fountain section. Well, that did happen back in 2024. We did not get one into the fountain itself, but it definitely tried. A Ferrari got punted into the tires, and guess what? Lap number 1. Always going to be a bit of a tense moment for the field here this afternoon, as well, The lights are back on. The RC safety cars are going to take one more recon lap here before this race gets back underway. So Bravo Snow Shaft and Thiago Mello getting set to lead the way. And this is what I mean, right? It's going to be single file coming on through here into that final critical corner. And I mean, you just can't go double file. It's been tried and tested, both the real world and the sim, and it always ends in a complete track blockage.
I usually say in reference to the hairpin here at Long Beach, you can go side by side in the same way that you could also liquidate all your assets by nothing but lottery tickets and come out on the other end of it being a millionaire, but you wouldn't want to hedge your bets in that sense. This section has been turned into a parking lot more often than not, which is kind of humorous when you think about the part of this racetrack that immediately precedes it, considering that they do run off through a hairpin in the section through 9 and 10. But this hairpin going to be a tough point of contention all throughout this race, especially when we get into the lap traffic as well, Nolan. This is a short racetrack, so the GTP is going to have to worry about that traffic rather quickly into this.
Well, and speaking of lap traffic, right, I mean, you got the GT3 drivers just a little bit behind, but when you consider the fact that each class has their own individual green flag, they don't just all launch on the same green flag like you see in official races. You know, by the time the GT3s get to that green flag, the GTPs could already be well out of the fountain section, and they could be almost half a lap around by the time they complete that opening run.
Yeah, looking at the results in qualifying, there was still about a 3 to 4 second disadvantage that the GT pole sitters have compared to the back of the GTP field, so that's going to compound after a while, and doubly so at the start of this race. That's going to be super tough to try and nail down. Now, what position would you rather be in, Nolan? Would you want to be the GTPs with the better tires, the better grip, much more downforce, trying to weave your way in and out of the GT3s, or would you want to be the GT3 drivers seeing those GTPs kind of approach in your rearview mirror like Exocet missiles? I don't think there's no good position to be in of the two, but I feel like there's a part of me that would rather be one of the GT3s because there's only so much you can do from that position.
I have to agree, and it's more from the fact that those cars are more predictable to drive. I mean, these GTP drivers, they're constantly having to be on the absolute ragged edge of control, and there's no harder track for a high downforce cars than a much lower speed and an incredibly bumpy street circuit like the Long Beach.
It's got to be a tough race. I think that is fair to say. Got to be super tricky to manage, especially this first lap. I can only buckle my seatbelt as tight as it can go.
Well, the lights are out aboard the iRacing BMW M2 pace car, and that means we are getting set to go racing. You'll see the field double up as they make their way out of turn. Well, I was about to say out of turn 4, but out of the hair, but I'm still on oval racing brain from last night. Bravo Social Mello will jump on the loud pedal, and it's go, go, go for the Sports Car Grand Prix of Long Beach. Mello able to get a good getaway at the head of the field as he finally launches in that restart zone, making the way down into the opening couple of corners here. And it will be Mello who will lead the way through the opening bend, and looking like we're going to be clean, at least in the prototypes, but these GT3 cars could be a different story.
And the GT3's now hitting that start zone now, and drivers gunning it already. A driver down in pit lane. We'll have to figure out who that was and the reason why that is the case, but a smooth start up at the front. GT3, it looks like they're single file for the most part. As you can see, the GTP's blowing the doors off and the signage off the wall, and the run down to turn number 6.
Bit of double file going through here, always risky, but it looks like we're going to be able to more or less get through safe and sound. A far cry from the 2024 rendition of this race. Up at the head of the field, Thiago Mello continues to lead the way. No major moves being made in GTP's for positions. Already, though, one driver with the black flag, Chris Cadiz, is going to be forced into pit road early on.
Yeah, so super unfortunate to get this race up and rolling on a bad foot as we see another driver running into difficulties here in the GTP category. That's Joao Diaz in the No Limits Sim Racing Academy number 2. The Acura heading off into the runoff area. It looked like down into turn number 9. That's a very tricky braking zone to nail down. Always covered in shadow, a little bit cooler into that part of the racetrack. So a lot less grip through there. It's also super choppy and bumpy in through the braking zone. So that may be a trouble point that we have to keep our eyes on all throughout the day.
Mello leads the way for lap number 1. It is going to be Peter Spikeman who will lead the way at the end of lap number 1 for GT Pro. Same story for Lucas Santos in GTM. The Vulture Motorsports crew did not have the best of runs at Daytona. Lucas Santos had done everything he can to put that car in a good spot. Now he leads the way in his category. A big afternoon for the driver formerly from Screech Moose Motorsports in this championship, and a big turnaround for Vulture Motorsports in GTM as they get set to try to turn that season around for the opener.
Yeah, and in a series like this, starting off in January and running all the way through to August with some breaks in the calendar, momentum is always a big thing. You got to stay with it mentally. Make sure that you're never beating yourself up too much for too long of a time, whether it be for a driver or whether it be for a team. You just got to keep the juices flowing. You got to keep the momentum rolling. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. If you snap your ankle on that first step, that's not going to bode well for the rest of the journey. So I think these teams are looking to try and maybe right the wrongs that they may have experienced in Daytona.
Red La Competición real slow coming through the hairpin here as he been tipped or as he tried to go for a lunge at the Porsche. No one around him, and did he catch the wall on the inside perhaps?
Oh, I think that could have been it, and here we see the first appearance of the day, probably not going to be the last, of the Long Beach parking lot through the hairpin. Driver spun around, blocking the access for everybody else. That's a very easy mistake to make. Drivers have done it in sports cars. Drivers do it in IndyCar quite a lot as well. I think it was Pato O'Ward who was trying to contend for his first championship back in 2021 when the IndyCar season finale was here that year. He was battling for the title with Alex Palou. The both of them were gunning for their first crown that year. And Pato O'Ward ruined any sort of chance that he had at the championship with a moment through there, ended up costing him dearly. So that is a very easy mistake to make, to be sure. We're going to take a look at some more replays of the drama that we saw a little bit farther in the back. You can actually see before the drop of the green, a Mercedes there in the back of shot having to pull off a three-point turn off through the hairpin.
And I believe it was Sean Hatfield who actually is the one that got punted around in that final corner. We'll try to give a better look at that one. And they kind of bottled up there. You can already see, in fact, already spun around. So one of the bet just got tipped around by that massive bottleneck. And that's actually why we saw the Mercedes running wide, trying to avoid a car that was stopped before the field even had a chance to take the green flag. And that's a tough break as that car has a lot of damage. They're actually in pit road right now. They have not been able to get a single lap on the board.
So a little bit of damage taking them out of contention already. We'll probably see them rejoin. That's one thing that I do love about sports car racing that I think has been a little bit lost recently in the NASCAR side of things. Drivers rejoining the race, just trying to find any sort of time and position that they can, even with a heavily damaged race car. Thankfully here in this series, you do have enough time to repair the cars. Don't have to worry about going out there with a door that's taped on or anything of the sorts. But in a series like this, with spread out races, any points can matter. We've seen it play out in the sim. We've seen it play out in real life. Even if you find yourself down early, you're never out of it.
Well, and VSCA enforces very strict minimum distance requirements for all drivers in this field, and we've already seen one driver get caught out by the Errors race with the D24, had a hardware failure, went full throttle into the International Horseshoe in the opening 2 hours, as boy, VSCA Competición Circular Air clipping the outside tire bundles, but because they failed to meet the 25% race distance here, they were relegated to the reserve list. So that's it's a pretty harsh punishment for failing to meet those minimum race requirements. So I think we can definitely expect to see Sean Hatfield's Vulture Motorsports number 65 back on the racetrack before too much longer.
Yeah, as long as you can dust yourself off well enough in the early stages, even if you do find yourself running into some trouble, you can never say it is over until that checkered flag falls. So we'll have to keep an eye on all these racers, even those who fall into difficulties early, keeping tabs with the GTPs. This is a calm before the storm, Nolan. They haven't hit the lap traffic yet. Emphasis there on yet. They will probably approach it in the next couple of moments. We're out on board with Delta Racing, the number 12 car, currently running in P8 at the moment in that GTP category, right in tow of Joao Diaz in the, my apologies, that's not Joao Diaz, that is Sergey Lanzar in the Porsche right up the road. But This is a point to pounce if you are a GTP driver. Actually, as I say that, they have now caught up to the GT3 traffic. I was just going to say, this is a perfect window before you hit the traffic and the tires are up to temp that you can really start to pounce. Now, however, they're going to have to worry about these slower cars.
Oh, look out! We're going to go 4 wide. It looked like for a moment they get it down to just 3. And that breaks up the fight for the lead. Thiago Melo with a brave lunge up the inside of 3 wide. Christopher Daniel really thought about going for 4, but I think he took a very wise move on backing out there. That could have been incredibly hairy for this field. Get another look at this one and just see how close they came to absolute disaster.
You know, we were expecting some gutsy moves, wasn't expecting it that early. Thankfully for the racers, the track does fan out a little bit as they head their way that small little crackle flat out run into turn number 6. But even then, you know, we were expecting some aggression, considering this is the first sprint race of the season. I wasn't expecting it that early and in the first run of lap traffic for your GTP cars.
Trouble for Delta Racing. They have gotten themselves a meatball flag for one of the Delta Racing competitors. Not sure which one it does. It looks like it's for Andre Vitor Diaz potentially on this one, although that car looks like it's handling all right. But one of these drivers is going to be forced to come down pit road. We'll try to get a look, see if we can find out what happened.
This is heading our way off through the only part of this racetrack that isn't technically on streets. It's a parking lot run through 9 and 10, and sometimes it can turn into a parking lot, not even with a racer running into some trouble. It's just a stack up down into the hairpin, and that's going to catch some drivers out early. I said this in reference to the parking lot moment a few moments ago, and I'm going to say it once again in terms of that stack up. We will see quite a lot of that throughout the day. Drivers just running into each other, small little bits of incidental contact that you can't really look at too much in terms of penalties or major damage, but it can be kind of death by a thousand cut situation. These cars are very aero sensitive, especially the GTPs. Some small little aero tweak and the handling on that car is probably going to vanish.
Already 10 minutes down, and the GTPs are in the thick of GT3 traffic at the moment. Here are the leaders of the GT3 Pros. This is SimCity Race VSR Competition. Porsche versus Acura, as Peter and Sergey continue to fight it out. Right now, Duran's Acura looking strong, half a second behind. The problem is he just hasn't been able to find a way to punch through.
Yeah, just waiting for that extra push. Just a small little nudge, doesn't matter what it can be, just to break through and finally punch a ticket into a good spot. So as much as it's getting hair-raising in the GTP category, this GT3 fight is always one that I like to keep my eyes on. GT3s, some of the most competitive racing that you can get both in sim and in real life. I heard it once be described that's kind of like our modern day version of touring car racing. It is so popular. There's so much brand recognition and brand loyalty in the series. I mean, just looking at the cars that we have here in this top 3, you've got a wide-ranging set of different makes and models. You got a Porsche up on the front, an Acura in P2, the brand new Aston Martin running right in tow, and even on the GT-AM side of things, you got a Porsche, a Mercedes, and a Ferrari running in the podium spots over on that side of the coin. So just love to see a massive amount of different cars, for these teams to sink their teeth into, and as a broadcaster as well, I do love a little bit of variety to see out there on the racetrack too.
Trouble for Delta Racing's Andre Vitor Diaz, the car that had already had some problems early on with some incidental contact, now stuck facing the wrong direction. And this is a really bad situation because you have no idea what's coming around that corner. He's got to wait for a clear moment before he can really reset and fight his way through. He is going to manage to actually reset just fine, but that has costed him about half a lap worth of time up to the class leader.
Oh, as it's a game of lap traffic chicken gone wrong, going for the move on that Mercedes, and a GTP and a GT3 getting caught up in that as well. Not sure who that was that picked up any sort of residual contact, but that could have been a little bit of damage. I think it may have been Gordy Vermeulen in this number 25 BMW running in P8 at the moment. That car looks like it's traveling a little bit slowly. I'm not sure whether that car is wounded or just trying to get back into the swing of things, but either way, you slice it. Once again, the tight confines of Long Beach, proving to be a real tricky to manage, especially with that lap traffic getting into the fold. Moves into turn number 1, usually seen pretty formulaic, but any move around here can be tricky and can end in tears. Like that is a good example.
And now Timothy Johnson for iRacing Today Motorsports finds himself around. That's one of the Aston Martins spun out of the GT Pro category. Now, luckily enough, that is on the exit of turn number 5, so he's able to get quite a bit of breathing room there to reset. But look at where he's rejoined, right into the thick of this fight. And he is on overheated tires. This is a nightmare for the Aston.
Yeah, overheated tires in the sports car world are absolute torture. As you can see, the GTPs put a 3 wide heading down the back straightaway. That was close with the wall jutting out a little bit there. This is where it starts to get really hair-raising. We've seen drivers already stick at 4 wide, but in these small little tight confines, not heading down the straightaways, all through the tight and twisties of this track, heading off through the back roads, it feels like, is when it is going to be super, super nervous. It feels like I'm being tased looking at the moves that some of these GTPs are pulling on the GT3s.
This is Timothy Johnston. Just took too much curb, and he has caught that inside wall, but critically, he was able to keep it out of the field. That is, of course, the big good news for him. But now, because of that massive constitution that we saw there coming around, look at the number 94 of SWF Motorsports and Jason Brothers. Damage on the front, damage on the rear, and that is all for the accordion stack that we got into that final corner.
Yeah, and it's not only not very visually appealing looking at a car with some bent front and rear bumpers. That's going to affect you a decent amount here. You know, it is very slow turns that you've got here at Long Beach, so you don't have to worry about the aerodynamic grip too much compared to Daytona for the last round of the championship. But that is still going to sting nonetheless. Jason Brothers behind the wheel of that number 94 entry. I wonder what he's got to be managing, because that's a mix of both ends running into some trouble. This is worse though. Gordy Vermeulen, who we saw with a little bit of damage earlier on, we saw him running slow. He's going to be running a heck of a lot slower, completely missing front bumper. The front clip has split in half as the sort of hood part, it's not the hood obviously because the engine's in the back of the car, but I've never seen a GTP car be damaged in that way. Let's take a look at how it took place. This is heading off into the hairpin.
Oh, this is that big stack up, and he actually came to a complete stop. And how about that? The McLaren going for quite a lunge down the inside, and then it got hit by one of his fellow GTP runners as well. I'm a bit surprised that car didn't come down to pit road, but I guess if the car drives straight, we're not going to be racing into the night here, so no headlights, no problem, it seems.
And no headlights, no problem is one thing, but no splitter, no downforce is going to be another. I'm not sure if that's going to work out well for Gordy Vermeulen. I mean, if he can run that car at strength and keep it quick out there on the road, more power to him. But I know me personally, I wouldn't want to be driving in a GTP car without any sort of front downforce, especially here of all places. That is Understeer City. I believe the other car that made the extra bit of contact heading all through the hairpin, I think that may have been the Albrecht Motorsports car being driven by Mark Schneschel right now. So I think that was the other car involved in that, the number 96 in the GTP category, running into Gordy Vermeulen as he was trying to get it back rolling in the right direction. A very similar looking race car. It was the number 96, but either way you slice it, it seems like these GTP drivers, I mean, we were expecting lap traffic to be a bit of a pain in the hind end, and pain in the hind end it has been.
Battle for the GTP, the GT3 pros continues to be aggressive as they'll continue to duke it out amongst themselves. And wouldn't you believe it now, Sergei Lazaire having picked up a mechanical flag. That is quite a bit of damage on the front, and I'm willing to bet he has found the wall quite significantly.
And I can imagine there's some suspension damage done to that car as well. I wonder if it was coming out of turn number 1, and I think it may have been carrying too much speed into that Acura wall. He's going to go. That wall, that tire barrier on the outside of turn number 1, I feel like it has its own gravitational pull. I've seen so many racers make contact with that. Believe me, I've done it several times myself. I'm probably more familiar with that. I've visited that tire barrier more this decade than I visited my high school. That's saying something. But no, that tire barrier is super tough, very easy to smack it. And whenever you do, either in a GTP or a GT3, the consequences are going to be dramatic.
I will give this field credit. We've gone a lot longer in this opening run than I thought we would, as there you see Sergio Lazaire now making his way into pit road. And how about this? A bit of an overtake there as Diaz fighting his way around Ruiz, and that was a result of using a lap Travis at pink, and one of our lone Acura GTPs in the field now sending it down the inside. That was the pass for 9th place in the GTP field.
Yeah, and I feel a little bit bad for the Acura runners. If my memory serves me correctly, it was one of the first GTP cars that we got. Actually, no, it was a BMW that we got first up. But it's been a bit of a forgotten stepchild in the GTP world, both in the sim and in real life. Nobody really runs it. Everybody tends to gravitate towards the likes of the BMW, the Porsche, and the Cadillac, and the Ferrari as well. We do have a Ferrari running out here. Nicholas Peterson out there on the racetrack on one of those Ferraris right now. But never mind the GTP storylines. We have plenty of time to talk about those and the class interference that may go on there. We've got ourselves a GT3 battle going on right now. As much as the GTPs were getting affected and kind of had to turn up the wick with the aggression there, the GT3s have to turn down the wick of aggression whenever those lap cars come around them. They need to just settle into their groove, and then when they finally get the opportunity to, you're going to start to see these racers get aggressive and start to duke it out. This is the scrap for the top spot in GT Pro. I feel like it's only a matter of time before we see an Acura leapfrog in front of a Porsche.
Yeah, for the first time coming down Seaside Way, you saw SimCity Racing's Peter Spikeman having to go on defense headed into the Firestone turn. And it could very well be the case that Sergio Martinez Duran has found an extra piece of extra piece of pace underneath him. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. But he continues to battle his way through this grid, and well, no defense this time. So I think whatever the gremlins were going on for the number 71, looking like may have been able to more or less get away with it. Although cannot say the same for yet another one of the GTP runners who's now got a mechanical flag.
Taking a look, right as I was talking about one of the Ferraris, and nothing. Oh my goodness. Seeing a Ferrari get turned into a monster truck, contact with a Porsche heading out of turn number 8. That's onto the back straightaway, and that turn, you bottleneck so much. You go from about 4 to 5 lanes to about 2 or 3 at best, and that is one of the strangest collisions that I've ever seen. Major damage on both of those cars, and we nearly saw the underside of the Ferrari GTP car there.
And that was Diego Rodriguez for Friday Sport, the car that ended up having a nasty incident there. Just clipped that inside wall, and that's the hazard of a street circuit, right? I mean, you can try to cut corners all you want in a track like Daytona. Do that here, though. It's not an off-track 1X. You're firing back across the road, exactly like what we mentioned in the pre-race show.
Yeah, I think the best way I can sum it up with street racing is it can go so well for so long, and then it can go so badly so quickly. You feel that you're in the groove, you finally build up a little bit of confidence on the tight confines of a street circuit, and then a street circuit is going to remind you that your confidence was horribly misguided and terribly misplaced. Unfortunate to see that contact heading out of turn number 8, but I'll be honest, Noel, I know I've said this in reference to many of the turns, especially the hairpin thus far. Turn 8 may have a kill streak by the time we're done with this race. It is just so awkward heading your way off in there. The track bottlenecks massively, nothing you could really do there, and it is one of the alterations that was made when the other track came into the form that it is right now in the year 2000. It used to be a far more straight shot and straighter approach with a quick series of S's leading into that turn before what is now turn number 8. But no, it's so tough. Trying to, especially when you've got lap traffic involved. Fantastic shot of it right now. Got that tire barrier on the outside that cuts out a massive chunk of the racing surface, and the racing surface that you have, period, even excluding that tire bundle, is cut down over in half. just because of the nature of that turn. It feels like you're going from a highway into an alleyway in the span of a couple of seconds.
It is kind of interesting how there's two calamity corners at Long Beach, right? You got this turn right here, turn 8, and then you also have this corner, turn number 5. Turn number 5 for oversteer, turn 8 for understeer. And of course, there are those ever infamous curves that caused so many problems a few years ago when the Indy cars came out here. Remember that? They moved one of those curves and just didn't tell anyone about it, and it caused, what, I think like 4 or 5 crashes in the opening practice session, which really goes to show just how on the line you really have to take that lap after lap, that just moving it by a few inches is enough to completely screw up your line.
Yeah, and as someone who's spent over a decade running an autocross for the SCCA here in the U.S., I know how quickly things can change if you just have a slight misalignment of one cone or another. As well, we always used to drive around, racing around cones, a matter of inches separating you from picking up a time penalty if you knocked one of them down. And if you move a cone over just by a foot, it's going to make a world of difference. Here on a racing circuit, if you move a curb over by a little bit in these fine-tuned race cars, it's going to cost you dearly. You know, that's not the worst bump-related chicanery that has gone down with the street circuits with Indy cars in the state of California. If anyone remembers the ill-fated San Jose street circuit that they ran in 2005 in Champ Car, they actually ran over trolley tracks there, kind of similar to the street circuit in Baltimore a few years later, and that had a similar fate as an event as well. But before we get too lost talking about the racing history, we've got 2 hours, and I'm here in the booth, so we're probably going to have many discussions about that. We do have this battle starting to intensify with some slightly wounded race cars here in GTP.
No! And there goes Albrecht Motorsports, just getting taken out by No Limit Sim Racing. So Mark Skirshell stopped in probably the worst possible point on the racetrack.
Oh, no.
Yeah, honestly, I know it's always ill-advised to drive counter course, but realistically, that's the only way you can get a 3-point turn going here. You got to find a gap and then just gun it into the runoff area so you can get that corner executed properly. Because there's no way you'd be able to do this in that tight bottleneck on the exit of the hairpin.
Yeah, pretty much your only option if you didn't want to drive reverse and pull a 3-point turn was you'd have to drive the right way around the track in reverse and probably pull down pit lane. And the steering, whenever you're driving a rear engine or mid-engine car in reverse, you turn that steering wheel a little bit. Next thing you know, that front end's going to whip around and you're probably going to have some front suspension damage. So I think a good call there. Lost out on a boatload of time. Whenever we talk about incidents, we usually think, oh yeah, it's not too bad with a rejoin. But on a street circuit, if you have a small little mistake, a small little bump, a small little bit of contact, it can snowball into something major. If this was a normal racetrack, you probably would have been able to get it turned around, lickety-split, would have lost, I don't know, probably about 5 seconds. Instead, here on Long Beach, you lost closer to probably 25 seconds of that.
This fight for the lead in GT Pro has started to escalate into a 4-car fight. Tomas Silva for Virtual Power Sim Racing has entered the fight at the tail end of the field here, and that's Porsche 911 looking feisty. And one thing I will say, I'm a bit surprised you haven't seen Blanca Motore Sim Sports Aston Martin make some more moves. This is a car that was always fighting for the class lead during the Daytona 24, was always fighting for podium spots, and was never one to be afraid to shy away from the bold lunges. So, again, I'm shocked that this Aston Martin has not made some more aggressive moves, but they might be looking to play it a little bit tamer. A lot of drivers after the D24 are dangerously close to the 12 license point penalties that would lead to a race suspension for that driver. So if you're one of the star drivers near that limit, you're not necessarily going to want to go for too much of a lunge. And Christopher Daniel now facing the wrong way. This could be a safety car, and it is.
So the first yellow out before we get into the final 2 hours. That's for a stack up heading out of turn number 1. We've seen this play out already. Christopher Daniel trying to pull off the 3-point turn in that very long Porsche 963 GTP car. That's going to bring the yellow out, and it's been a very hectic start to this race. I think it is fair to say, but all in all, Nolan, I think it's been a smooth start compared to what most would expect with a field this big on a track this small.
Oh, and there was actually one car already into the wall behind, and I was wondering if this was unrelated. It was Delta Racing's Andre Vitor Diaz, so day going from bad to worse for the driver, the number 12. This will be another look. We'll slow it down for you as well. And he's already into the wall. He's way overshot.
Oh, and nothing that driver, the number 55 car, could have done. You have such little room to work with, and look at that Porsche, the number 84, trying to drop the anchors. That's probably why the yellow was brought out, and understandably so. That is a dangerous position to be involved in as we see that number 12 car. Once again, similar shades to what we saw a bit earlier on play out, with a driver scraping the wall through there. Just going for that shallow approach, the shallow line in, trying to get a move done on the inside, and then just overshooting it massively. Pulling some experience from real life. It was Ricky Taylor, I believe, and one of the first times, in fact, the very first time, I believe it was, when GTPs headed to Long Beach for the very first time in this rule set. Went for a move late on, I believe, Tom Blomqvist behind the wheel of a Meyer Shank car for the lead and win in that race in the final moments. Went for the dive, hit the wall, and ended the race under yellow as a result. Going for a move into turn one, as I said a bit earlier on. It can work out very well. If it works out well, you come out of it smelling like a bed of roses. But if something goes awry, you're going to come out of it smelling like the complete opposite.
Tell you what, this field did a fantastic job of slowing down for this, because, I mean, look at, you come around the corner, and it's just a minefield of debris and cars. So drivers like VSCA Racing, Unitron, and Fisher Motorsports, that, of course, would be Marco Silva alongside Nicholas Pedersen. They did a fantastic job, and I think it was actually race leader Tiago Mello who got caught up in that melee.
I'm going to take a look to see whether that was the case. If it was, that would be a very unfortunate way for their race to potentially get derailed. We'll have to see how major it was.
It was.
There was a contact. Yeah, that was some pretty significant hits. Bodywork damage and maybe some suspension damage done to that car too. That's big.
Oh, that could be devastating for the number 20 entry. And we begin what could be a lengthy safety car here. There's, of course, an extensive procedure that has to be done, including class sorts and driver wave arounds. And on a street circuit, it just takes that much longer to get everything sorted, because it takes that long to get a driver waved around through this pack. But you saw it as well as I did on that long shot down the straight. That car is not driving straight right now.
If we could jump onto an onboard shot and see the steering wheel when he heads his way out of the hairpin, you'll get to see how bad the damage is. Look at the amount of lock that he has to put in. That's not too major. Look at this. A little bit off kilter on the steering. Yeah, there you can see it right there. Now, I'm not sure if that's front suspension damage, maybe bending something in the geometry up in the front end, maybe bending the steering ever so slightly. I'm not sure whether it's that or damage in the rear end, maybe to one of the toe links, causing the car to crab just a little bit. Not sure exactly which is the case, but either way, suspension damage done to that car, and that's the sort of damage that, if it isn't enough to give you a meatball flag, it is just going to drive you up the wall for the remainder of the stint.
It would be front suspension damage, because you're going to watch. He's going to take a knock there on the front right, and then immediately into the front left as well. So definitely broke something to geometry, and then nowhere for Pack Simsport to go. Kind of looked like, because remember, Andre Vitor Diaz was a lap down at the time. I feel like he was trying to pull to the inside to allow Bravo Snow Shatton through. That was the race leader at the time, but then it didn't go to plan. It overshot the braking point and went into the wall. And there you see Fisher Motorsports as well as VSCA Racing just sneaking right through the gaps.
Yeah, I think the fact that was only a 3 to 4 car incident is frankly a miracle. That could have very easily been a full field, track blocking, field crushing stack up heading out of turn number 1. Another turn on this racetrack that bottlenecks quite a lot. You know, don't usually see it too much on the F1 side of things when it comes to street circuits, although a lot of them nowadays aren't really street circuits, they're just built to look like streets. Here, however, it's an old school track, and with that, you've got some old school characteristics that don't really make it the safest in the world. Not very uniform in terms of the width, so heading your way into turn number 1 around that aquarium section into the fountain section right afterwards. The track is very, very narrow through there, so it can easily end in catastrophe. That's unfortunate for all the drivers that got involved. I wonder how this is going to affect the number 20, because of course, major damage on that car, but we have to consider How's this going to work in terms of, are they going to try and make gradual repairs throughout this race? Because I'm sure with the field stacked up like this, they're not going to be able to hold on to the race lead. I mean, handling notwithstanding, that's just going to mess with the driver's head, having to always, like he talked about right before he grabbed the green, Nolan, these GTP drivers always have something to manage. If you have damage on that car, suspension damage no less, that's just going to add on more and more onto that house of cards until eventually it's all going to come crashing down.
So for those at home, yes, the iRacing pace car is pulling down into pit road, but we are not going back to green flag conditions. The reason being, it is easier to get through the extensive full course yellow procedure if that pace car is not actively leading the field. So the full course yellow is still very much enforced in. Tiago Mello has been confirmed, I believe, to have a meatball flag. And credit, that means that now that we are quote-unquote under green, according to iRacing, he's got 3 laps to come down and get that meatball fixed. So if pit road's not open in 3 laps, he's in a lot of trouble.
And you know what was interesting, as we were seeing that field head their way across that start-finish line through the bend in the road on the start-finish straightaway, I saw Mello hit the wall on the inside. Now, that could very well have just been a small little brain fart, blip of the brain, hitting the fence, not really paying attention, trying to manage something, talking to his team, whatever the case may be. Or maybe he's just trying to, like, I've seen it go out before. I think Jimmy Broadbent did one time in one of his attempts at running the Le Mans 24 in sim, and ended up smacking the barrier just to try and change the damage. People have done that before, hit the fence and try and make the damage a little bit different as big stack up in the GT3 field. This has got to be nerve-wracking stuff for these racers trying to avoid any sort of incidental contact here. They are ground to a halt as they're heading their way out of turn number 1. But now I wonder whether Tiago Mello is trying to do something a little bit funky to either change the damage or what the case may be. We'll have to wait for confirmation. Of course, this is all speculation here in the booth.
You know, that right there is a perfect demonstration of how rush hour traffic develops into these slow-moving traffic jams. And I'm going to get another look at this one because I want to really kind of put emphasis on this if we can. So watch right here. So one car gets a bit of a ding going, and that's going to stack up everyone behind. One car brakes a bit more than they have to. The car behind him brakes a bit too much, and then, well, the rest is history. This is exactly why rush hour traffic happens on the interstate, right? You can have, say, a rabbit runs across the road. Somebody swerves in front of the other car. That car brakes. No incident. But, you know, by the time you get there, 40 minutes later, it's long gone. But you're still seeing the backup train that it caused.
Well, Nolan, we do have to consider the fact that we are in and around Los Angeles, so I guess that is just typical LA traffic playing out as they headed their way out of turn number 1.
You're not wrong. We got a lot of cars down pit road in particular. Pretty much the entire GTP field is in. A split decision, though, on GT3 cars. Not a lot of GT3 runners are into the box.
I will say these GTP field, I think they were maybe coming to the end of their stint. I wonder if some of these drivers decide just to fuel to kind of break the race up into hour marks. So come in at around the 2-hour mark and then around the 1 hour just to make it as round off and as smooth of a race as they can. The 20 still stopped there trying to get some of that damage repaired. That's going to give the race lead in GTP, I believe. There we go. That's the number 51 car first up off the jacks. Gonna be leading that field down out of pit lane. But fascinating to see the split calls in GT3. Gotta wonder what sort of strategy they're playing at.
Looking like 8th on up in GT Pro have opted to stay out, as well as 5th on up in GTM. And quite a few drivers, however, are actually taking the chance here under this safety car to utilize driver swaps here. So we got Danny Fonte still in the car for GTP. I believe Sebastian Gonzalez Burgess in for Red Lab Competición. That's a new contender, I do believe. So some drivers are going to opt to swap out drivers. Christian Malcherek jumps in for Matco Fisher Motorsports. Luis Cunha, I think a fresh driver in for Virtual Power Sim Racing. Josh Goen in for Goen Racing. Henry Miettinen in for Rusty Spatulas. And I mean, hey, a safety car is a great point to go for a driver swap.
Yeah, it is. If you throw your driver into the car under green flag conditions, especially for some of the drivers in GTP, that is a bad time to pull off a swap. You're pretty much it's the equivalent of throwing a child into the deep end of the pool. So I think this is a good call to come down pit lane now, trying to minimize any sort of shock that may go on when a racer gets into the car for the very first time, as we still see you're at 1 point race leader down in pit lane trying to repair the damage on that race car. Rather significant, so I can imagine they're going to be stuck here for a while and potentially go a couple laps down as a result. Very unfortunate set of circumstances. Frankly, nothing that Thiago Mello could have done there in the run-up into turn number 1. The accident that put us under yellow for the first time here. But either way, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are that lead up to that falling anvil coming down on your head. If you're the one leaving it with a headache, you're still going to be the one taking Advil in the morning.
3 minutes to go before we reach that 2 hours to go mark in this race. And now that pit stops are complete, we can begin the next phase of the Code 69, which is, of course, the second round of wave buys. Once that is complete, we'll get the class sort, and after that, we will be able to get ourselves back to green flag racing here. So it shouldn't be too much longer, I hope at least. What we do have, Ron, we have Danilo Vaz, the team principal for Bravo Snow Shatun, who will be able to kind of lend his thoughts to what has just taken place here in this one. Let's bring Danilo Vaz up into the broadcast booth. A tough break, Danilo, for you and the rest of the crew for Bravo Snow Shatun. You were leading this race. We were looking set to be the odds-on favorites to win. And what's your take on what happened there?
Yeah, man, just unfortunately, because I don't know what to say right now, because we just practiced the whole weekend very well. We were fastest in the FP1, second in the FP2 pole, and it was in control of Thiago's hands, the race. It was very, very good from his pace and from his side. And I don't know what happened to the 12 there, man, but I mean, if you're a lap down, you should be, I mean, a bit more cautious, especially with the class leaders, you know. And I don't know what happened there. I'm gonna talk to Delgado later to see what happened there with him. But it's unfortunate because we were leading, we were very good, we were very quick today, and on point to win our first race here in VSCA. But unfortunately, it didn't go to our way, and that's so sad.
Well, it's still a long way to go. You mentioned having around 7 minutes worth of repairs, which is why we still see that car in the box. Do you have any hopes that potentially you can look to strike back with some more attrition throughout the course of this race?
I mean, we're gonna hope for some yellow flags now, but as the race is going pretty well with the flow, so I don't know if there's gonna be there are much chances for us to get back. But I don't know. We're gonna try to get back to the race as soon as possible with that damage repaired, and try to complete as well to get some points. And because you know it's a long way for this championship, there's a whole year ahead of us. But I mean, we were gonna try to get some momentum to Sebring as well. So I think it's gonna be important to just try to get completed this, to get this over, and try to move on as well, because it's good for us, and I don't know, it's not going to be good for our health if we try to be down on ourselves with this wreck today.
Well, season-long goals, obviously, it's been a pretty stellar way to kick off the season for you guys here. You were having good performances at Daytona, and up to this point, you were having a good performance here this afternoon. Do you have high hopes on some high-scoring points races coming up in the next few months?
Yeah. We have a great group. We have Thiago Mello that was really quick today. We have Gabriel Packley, who wasn't going to be racing today, but he's also very quick. Gustavo Frigoto also had a strong Daytona, and Henrique Gomes as well. So I think we have a great group. We have big hopes to get some great results, even fight for the championship if we can. I do agree that we are very quick, so I think that we can be getting very good results. It's just gonna be how the race is gonna be going for us right now. We have a bit of unlucky day at Daytona. We got that crash in the start of the race that the guy lost his pedals and came straight back to us. So, I mean, we're gonna get some good luck eventually, and I hope so, because it's very sad and it's very kind of depressing of how these first two races got for us. But I believe in my group. I believe in my drivers as well.
Well, still a long season to go. We'll hopefully see you back up at the front before too much longer in this championship. And we'll wish you the best of luck throughout the rest of not just today, but into the next few races as well.
Thank you, Nolan. Thank you, man.
Bravo Stowe, Shatton's team principal, Danilo Vaz, coming up and giving us some insights on how the race has gone from their perspective here. And I mean, it's hard not to be dejected, right, Ron? I mean, you were having such a good run, and, you know, second race in a row taken out by an incident that you had, it was nothing of you doing. They did nothing wrong, and just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He talked about that big crash at the 2024 where Aris Racing's throttle hung open, slammed the tires, rebounded across the track directly into their car. It's a tough pill to swallow when you have two races back to back where you just seem to be bit constantly like that.
Yeah, but one thing that stood out to me in that interview just then was the overwhelming, like, generally positive attitude. I mean, there's only so far a positive attitude can go when you constantly get struck by falling anvils or run into such poor luck at the start of this season. But as I said, don't get down on yourself too much. This is still a very long season, and even if it starts on a sour note, it's all about the way that you end your season, because that's when the championship points matter. That's when the season window pays out, and if you can make yourself known at the end of the season, you could very well be golden. So that's the main thing that stuck out to me, a very positive attitude from that team, even if they find themselves running into sheer misfortune more than anyone else.
Right now, you got a big chunk of this field spread out all the way around the racetrack. For example, here is race leader Jordi Vermeulen leading the pacing line, and these are drivers just catching up to the tail end of the line, right? But, I mean, this is the tail of the pacing line. It's almost a third of a lap backed up around this track, and it's hard to kind of visually describe just how packed together this field can be, and yet how spread out it is simultaneously.
Oh, you know, now the gears are turning in my head to see exactly how much real estate space these drivers are going to have, because this is a small racetrack compared to Daytona last time out. Only 1.9 miles. This may be the shortest racetrack that we run for the entirety of this season here in this championship. So I may have to run the numbers and break out the calculator for the first time in quite some time and figure out exactly how much real estate space all these drivers have. It can be very tight here on this circuit. You run out of your own space to really breathe quite quickly.
I think the only track that would be shorter would be Course de Monterrey. That, of course, is at WeatherTech Raceway at Laguna Seca. Now, I don't know the track lengths off the top of my head, but if I had to guess, that would be the only race that would even come close to being as short as Long Beach. And, you know, the last time we were out there, it was a journey. We had the GTPs catching lap traffic by the end of lap 2.
Yeah, that track is that is a squared off racetrack. No real long straightaways, just pretty much constant turns and an occasional flat out run. That track is just a little bit longer at I believe it's about 2.25 miles. So it's a big gain over this, but still some small racetracks either way. We'll note as well, we just had a chat with them. The number 20 car, Thiago Melo, still behind the wheel. That has rejoined the track after some damage, although he did go for a spin on his outlap heading off into turn number 8. That was primarily due to contact with the curb. He's back out there on the circuit, though, trying to catch up to the cars, and once that happens, I think we may be able to get this race up and rolling after the first yellow flag period of the day.
Well, that restart going to be looming here as Wave rounds do appear to be complete. Class sort appears to be complete. So bar that one GTP trying to catch the tail end, I see no reason why we shouldn't be able to get back to green flag racing within the next lap or two here, if not this time.
Yeah, it looks like the field is starting to maybe get some more speed up and rolling. And yes, we are. I think we're about to get a green.
We sure are, and Jordi Vermeulen is off and away, and the pack is go once again from the streets of Long Beach. Vermeulen hightailing it down the front stretch into turn number 1, and already well clear of most of the GTP field.
An interesting point to bring up, which I'm a little bit kicking myself that I didn't bring up as we were getting the race back up and rolling. The restart zone for your overall leader is heading off through the hairpin, strangely enough. So once you head out of there, as soon as you head your way out of that turn, you can gas the throttle back up and get the speed rolling once more. Interesting storyline to keep our eyes on, of course, Thiago Mello and that team that is still trying to bounce back after the contact that took them out of the race lead to bring us under yellow for the first time here today. They're trying to make their way up through the field in the GT3 category. Fascinating to see how they tackle the next couple of laps.
That moment with the restart there is why you saw, oh, hold on, hello, that is Vermeulen, the driver that started this race in the lead, who has now gone around. And I was about to mention, that's why we saw him running so wide through that final hairpin, right? It was because he wanted to try and see if he could go at that corner, try to straight line the exit as much as possible, get a good jump. It worked successfully, but the problem is now he's having to come to pit road.
And that was heading off into the ever-challenging turn number 9, the heavy braking zone that leads into it. I wonder if there was some sort of contact, because it looked like he had already lost it before he had even gotten close to the turn. Let's see it here, light on the front end. Yeah, big lock up there. That's what I thought was going to happen with that missing front splitter. The weight on that car usually feels like an elephant is sitting on the front of these GTP cars at speed, but with that, feels like it can get very front light, and unfortunately for Jordi Vermeulen, that's exactly what has taken place. Double lock up into turn 9, gonna hit the fence, come down pit lane to serve a penalty as well. That's another driver. I believe that's a PAX Racing effort that was stopped on the outside of 1.
PAX
rejoining after the meatball.
Yes, that was PAX Sport, just trying to make sure he didn't interfere with the drivers. He was staying off the racing line and just out of the way, waiting for them to duck on through. We're looking at the battle for 5th in GTM. Locomotor Sim Sports Ben Winter trying to fend off John Santoro for Superstar Race Team, and SRI Motorsports is Richard Bell for 5th, 6th, and 7th. Oh boy, a big tank slammer there for the McLaren of John Santoro, nearly sending him around. He could have had a good run on Winter had it not been for that.
And everybody trying to settle into a groove. You got some drivers just trying to run the laps away. Their first time in these cars under green flag conditions here today. I wonder how those racers are being able to tackle the challenge right now. It's fascinating to keep our eyes on these battles, getting intense out there on the circuit in all 3 of our classes. This GTM fight for P5 gonna get maybe disrupted with this round of parking, heading off in through the hairpin. That's Will Robertson, the Wastegate Racing number 33 Mercedes. He's parked around. He's gonna have to pull off a 3-point turn to get that car rejoined without any further incident, and he will be able to do it without any extracurricular contact. Nice to see him finally get the opportunity to turn that car around.
And as well as that, we had a brief battle for position in the GTM field as well. So this is what happened to Wastegate Racing into the final hairpin. Got a bit of a how do you do from the McLaren right behind. Didn't catch the number on it, but again, just having to park up, wait, and hope for the best. Meanwhile, Locomotor came under fire from the McLaren down to the turn number 1. And it looked like Winter actually went too wide. And
very lucky to avoid contact with that tire barrier there as well. I said that turn 8 was probably going to have a kill streak by the end of the night. That tire barrier on the outside of 1 may very well have one, too. We've already seen a couple of racers scrape it, a couple of drivers smack that tire barrier. We've said turn 1 overtakes can end in catastrophe. Luckily for those racers, they avoided any further incident taking place there. But Josie, even at this point of the race, getting up to the first hour, being done and dusted and in our rear view mirror, you still got to handle this track with kid gloves.
I sure do, and it's not being made easy for the field on the afternoon. As you got to worry more about lap traffic than you do the actual drivers you're trying to fight it out with, and just hope that maybe they get screwed over by the lap traffic more than you do. It's one of those cases where no one is happy either having no lap drivers or being the driver being lapped. Long Beach really is one of those cases. It does not matter how clean you make it. Someone's going to be unhappy about where you made that pass. It's just nigh impossible to get an ideal run here.
Yeah, more often than not, getting a move done on a street course and cutting your way through the field like a hot knife through butter primarily relies on just keeping it clean, keeping your nose to the grindstone, not running into trouble. Now, granted, in a 2-hour and 40-minute long race, that is a heck of a lot easier said than done. But kind of bouncing off of that discussion about getting some overtakes done here, we mentioned how crowded the confines can be here with 45 drivers running around this racetrack on only 1.9 miles in length. I ran the numbers before we got the restart. I figured I would share this nice little stat here. That works out to one car every 222 feet. Now that may seem like a lot of distance if you're an ant, but if you're a race car running around a racetrack where a blink of an eye and you're already halfway through that distance, that is a very little amount of space left to worry about.
Well, so far, this restart seems to have been relatively uneventful. A couple of overtakes here or there, but otherwise, there was not the mad scramble for track position that we're used to seeing when we go back to green flag racing on a road course. So this field remains in lockstep, just single file for the most part. And again, a lot of that because of how tight this track is. Again, almost impossible to have that processional scramble, especially with where the restart zone is. You talked about how it's right on the exit of that hairpin, and that makes it so that by the time the rest of the field gets to the front straightaway, they're already back up to race pace, having been accelerated in the middle of a place where you can't even think about an overtake.
Yeah, and with that as well, you got to think about the rundown to turn number 1 on these restarts. That's probably part of the reason why we saw some drivers take it very gingerly and delicate off through there. We're going to be talking about the challenges of these turns. You mentioned not too long ago, Nolan, how there's a couple of spots that are real choke points and calamity corners around here. I would go out on a limb and say that the calamity corners around here include the likes of turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. It is such a tough racetrack, this. That's kind of what makes these street circuits here in the States, the ones that are a bit less polished, I think it's fair to say. I can't remember what driver it was on the Dinner with Racers podcast who said one time that the marquee of an American road course, either a street track or a purpose-built racing venue, is it's not built down to a matter of millimeters like the tracks are in Europe. It's pretty much just eyeballing a track, being like, that's close enough to the apex, and putting a cone down and saying that's 100 feet away from the turn. That's what makes this racetrack awesome. It is not built to millimeters. It's, of course, got a lot of engineering built into it to put the walls in the right place. There's still some jagged corners. There's still some jagged edges. There's some rough parts every now and then. That's what gives a racetrack like this a heck of a lot of character. And that's what gives it the staying power to make Long Beach one of the most storied street circuits in the history of motorsports.
Of course, most famous for the annual IndyCar race coming out here, as well as the IMSA race that's out here. There's been a whole host of other series that have been out here in the past. I think Formula Drift still hosts regular events in the parking lot section down at the tail end of the racetrack. I would not be surprised if though I still saw Stadium Super Trucks running out here. Whether they do or not, I don't know. I don't follow the series, but I know they certainly used to come out there, and it was some of the most watched events in the championship. I think the biggest part of this track's history was when it did play a big part in hosting the FIA Formula One World Championship. Of course, back then, the track layout was far different and really extended off of what is right now that final section, almost doubled, even tripled the length of the final sector. But hey, still a huge, rich piece of this track's history. And I got to be honest, if Circuit of the Americas or any of the current street circuits would fall by the wayside, my thought is, why are we racing in Miami? Come here.
Yeah, and there was a brief period of time before what we have nowadays with 3 races in the U.S. Of course, Miami, Circuit of the Americas down there in Austin, Texas, and the Las Vegas street circuit. There was a time where we also had 3 Grand Prix going on at the exact same time here in the States. I think it was 1 year back in the 80s, back when F1 was still racing in the parking lot of the Caesars Palace Hotel. I think it was in 82. They were running at Long Beach the same year, and I believe it was right towards the end of Formula One racing at Watkins Glen.
We also had Dallas as well playing host to a street circuit race. I think that only lasted, though, for a year or two, just due to the fact that the track couldn't stay together.
And I think that was the infamous running where Nigel Mansell was pushing his car across the line and ended up fainting because it was so hot there.
Yeah.
An interesting point to raise about that event was they tried to resurrect it a little bit later on in the decade. I believe it played host to an IMSA race just a couple of years later using parts of the Grand Prix circuit. It was built in a parking lot, I believe, part of the many odd street circuits that popped up in the U.S. from time to time in the 80s and 90s. It's just a small little tidbit of street circuit history that I always find to be rather fascinating. Oh, as that's a spin heading out of the hairpin. That's another Mercedes around. That's Claudio Di Santo in the Wolf Motorsports sim racing effort. Be careful, rejoin, spooking a driver off into the fence. I think I saw Porsche clip the wall on the outside.
Yeah, that was not necessarily ideal. That was one of the Fisher Motorsports cars that clipped the wall, and good thing that Wolf Motorsports sim racing able to keep it out of the wall. By the way, you are correct. IMSA did indeed race in Dallas. It was back in 1996 when they raced at the Dallas Street Circuit.
There's so many bizarre bits of racing history when it comes to street circuits. I absolutely love it. One thing that I do find to be kind of funny, I always not necessarily poke fun, but I'm in awe more often than not whenever I do a broadcast at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve up in Montreal. That track has kind of had the reverse trajectory of most other racetracks where they get more complicated and more chicanes are added to it over the years. That track has actually gotten simpler as time has come along. Long Beach, part of that same sort of area as well. The original configuration all the way back in 1975 was longer than the layout that we have now in 2025, 26.
I'm a fan of it, honestly. I mean, Montreal it's an iconic track today, and it would not be what it is if it had all those chicanes breaking up the casino straight. But boy, you saw a lunge there from SWF Motorsports trying to get down the inside of Intercom Fisher Motorsports for the 7th place spot in GTM. Right now, Jason Brothers all over the back of Ryan Steinhoff, trying to look to the inside here, coming into turn number 1. They got a GTP Porsche right behind, and that Porsche's going to have to wait as Steinhoff falls back to 8th, and Brothers completes the pass into 1.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, that number 94 Porsche had some pretty major damage in the first stint of this race. Now, however, that car is looking factory fresh and is here to fight, getting that move done to jump up into P8 in that GTM category. Gotta wonder what the car of the day is going to be, because in these GT3 races, you always have to consider what car may have the upper hand. Every single one of them has their own different unique characteristics, quirks and features, for a little bit of Doug DeMiro language there on that fantastic YouTube channel. But I think the Porsches may have the upper hand. I mean, we've got a Porsche leading in GT Pro, and we've got another Porsche leading in GTM.
We haven't talked about the Fords much today. Of course, Ford tends to get a lot of representation in other leagues, being one of the best cars for straight line speed, but with the BOP, that advantage was stripped away, so not a lot of Fords being represented here in VSCA. However, you do have one currently in the Class lead, Jason Petty leading the way. That is because we currently have mass pit stops underway for the GT grid. And in fact, you just saw a driver swap for SM Motorsports as Lawrence Dubrot jumps into the car. Quite a few drivers, in fact, going for driver swaps this afternoon.
Yeah, so after that previous yellow where we had some split strategies, we're starting to see kind of the southern end of that in a way, seeing the drivers now come down pit lane. I wonder what's going to be the strategy that decides the victory here. I think with how difficult it is to get some moves done, the strategy going to play a lot more importance than it does in some other races. I mean, always you have to think about it, considering how long these races are and how big of a role the pit stops play in deciding the final finishing order. But I feel like that is kind of cranked up to 11 here at Long Beach, just with how tricky it has been for racers out there in the circuit to actually get the move done. So maybe that is playing into it with these racers going for the split strategies. I was a bit surprised when I saw it at the time, but now thinking it over a bit more, seeing the second round of pit stops in the GT3 field, it's starting to click in my head.
Adrian Subiela out of the car. Adrian Alonso jumps into the car. So it's a team of Adrians for the 151 World of Sim Racing Team Corvette. Jose Barbosa also jumping into the car for Rick Team Racing just near the head of the field. You also have Thomas Fisher into the car for Vulture Motorsports' number 56 entry. So a few more teams going for driver swap. This is right around the time where you would go for the driver swaps because you're trying to get a jump up on the driver time requirements. And again, we saw drivers get caught out with at the 24 Hours of Daytona. In fact, it was the No Limit Sim Racing Academy number 2 entry, currently running 5th in the GTP field, that got caught for breach of minimum drive time requirements for their Acura. And they're hoping they don't repeat that mistake in Long Beach.
Yeah, that would be both unfortunate for the finishing order in both races and a bit of an embarrassment as well. So certainly everybody got to try and stay on top of that as much as they can. In the meantime, though, we still have some battles going out there on the circuit in the midst of this long green flag run that we find ourselves in the midst of right now, getting closer and closer to the final hour and a half of this race. So we thought that 2 hours and 40 minutes was a short period of time, especially considering Daytona in the last round of the season. We're running that clock down and down and down, and we've maybe got to see that level of aggression begin to build once more.
Well, build about as much as we can. And I think Long Beach is interesting when it comes to aggression, right? Because it's not really one of those racetracks where you can realistically try to attack your opponent constantly to put them under fire. So, here we go. Sim City Racing, the leader in GT Pro, into the box. We'll see if Spikeman jumps out of the car. But I feel like what a lot of drivers are going to be attempting here in this race, not necessarily trying to use aggression to go for moves. I think they're going to look to try to fill the mirrors to scare their opponents into making a mistake by making them think they're going to go for a move. It's all about mind games in a street circuit like this.
Oh, it is absolutely about mind games. You think back to the iconic F1 meme from about a decade ago, the clip of Jolyon Palmer saying you have to be alert on a street circuit. If you can get in a racer's head, just occupy their rear view mirror. You don't have to pounce, but if you can kind of play a game of cat and mouse where it's a cat playing with the mouse right before he eats it, you can really get in a racer's head, force them into a mistake, and we've seen already, and we'll see it a lot throughout the day, one small little mistake, one small little blip of concentration, and it can end in disaster. If you can play the mind games, get in the head of your competitor a lot, you can pretty much do whatever you want, and the only thing the competitor that you just messed with can do is just slip back in tow and think about how they can get you back.
Eddie Campbell fresh into the car for Sim City Racing. Behind him is the Aston Martin of Vlaco Motore Simsport, who has just put Tyler Redden into the car, and that will complete the pit stop cycle for the GT Pros after Sergey Martinez-Duran makes his stop, which he has done just now. So that is it then. Drivers are going to have their first full stints more or less complete throughout the GTs, and yet the GTP is already approaching the window where they're going to have to come down for the second time this race. Carlos Jumail hopping into the car, by the way, for VSR Competizione.
Yeah, now with new drivers hopping into these race cars, you gotta think of how the mindset will change throughout this field. We talked about the mind games that may be played in the driver-to-driver battles, but when you've got a new driver out there on the circuit, it is very rare to find two completely identical people, both in terms of looks and in terms of the way that they think. That is pretty much an impossibility in the world of motorsports. So with new drivers getting in, new blood getting in, drivers feeling a lot more refreshed than those who started this race, they're going to be tackling this circuit and tackling their competitors with a completely different frame of mind. Now, the benefit that some do have is the fact that it is, you know, in a battle for two drivers, two different teams that just had their driver swaps go down. That does kind of level the playing field somewhat, but you do have to consider what sort of change that we're going to have throughout the entirety of the field. Racers maybe getting into these cars could be a bit more aggressive, could maybe be a bit more cautious, maybe they're a bit uneasy about how they're feeling out there on the circuit. There's a lot of things that both us as the broadcasters are going to have to learn, and these drivers out there on the racetrack in the race cars are going to learn too.
What that full course yellow has really done is shake up the GT field in a massive way. So the usual runners that we saw at the front, like SimCity Race, Visa Competition, and more, they are now fallen by the wayside, because here is Christian Malcherek, Luis Cunha, and Timothy Johnson, the three-way fight for the GT Pro Class lead. However, here's the kicker to this. They're 20 laps on their stint already, having pitted under the full course yellow with the GTPs. So they are very much on a different cycle here. Now, assuming this race goes green to the end, what strategy is the winning one? I'd imagine it'd be the one where they stayed out.
That's an interesting question that you bring up there, Nolan. I would say that I'm with you in that sense, just because they probably made up a lot of ground on that restart, not having to worry about too much traffic, being able to stretch their legs up at the front of the field. It was rush hour traffic a little bit farther behind, and you do, of course, run that risk of getting caught up in some sort of drama, some sort of incident, picking up some sort of damage. Well, only time will tell. Obviously, I am not a strategist. I don't think any team would want me to be their strategist. If they want to win the last car championship, I would be the man to call. Otherwise, I'm probably not the right guy for the job. But I think we'll see throughout this race, and probably as we, in about an hour's time, once we get closer and closer to the final half hour of this 2-hour and 40-minute long race, we'll get a we'll get the fully painted picture as to which strategy of those GT3 drivers worked out well, and which one was maybe in retrospect the bad call to make.
Going Racing and BMW MTTSR's Connor Body and Chris Cadiz both looking to be a little bit tight here between the duo as they continue to fight it out for third place in GTM. And we haven't talked about the GTPs all that much since the restart, but I tell you what, Danny Fontaine has not been able to get away from Nicholas Pedersen. Pedersen has been keeping him honest, not within striking distance, mind you, but I mean, he's been there, usually within a second, and showing that, hey, you make one mistake, I'm here for you.
Yeah, and I mentioned the whole thing of a cat playing with a mouse before he eats it. If you just run behind and just always stay in a driver's head, you don't have to attack, you don't have to pounce, but if you can just let them know, it's like, hey, I'm here and I can do whatever I want to, that will mess with a driver's brain better than just about anything else that a racer could do. Remember back in my karting days, one of my closest friends was one of my closest rivals back then. That's how it usually worked in the karts. And right before one race, I was going to be the championship decider at the end of the season. I just went up to him, grabbed him by the shoulders, and shook him. And I ended up nearly winning the championship as a result of that. That shows you how those small little bit of mind trickery may not seem like too much. It can have very big circumstances. It's a domino effect. If you do just one small little thing, it'll stick in a racer's head. Jimmy Spencer once said that a race car driver never forgets, and that's a pretty good proof of it right there.
You saw Chris Cadiz make the move on Connor Botting coming down into the Takate turn. Botting tried to get the run back at him, but did not have enough overlap to make it stick. Second place is also up for grabs here in GT Pro. Christian Malcherek has been pulling away at the head of the field, but Luis Cunha has had his mirrors full with Timothy Johnson. Again, unable to break away from the Aston Martin behind.
Yeah, so trying to pull away, we talked about needing an extra push to try and get that upper hand. We'll have to see if an extra push can come, seeing the GTP traffic continue to deal with these cars. We've been long enough at this point here in this green flag rundle, and I do have to consider whether we're getting to what I like to call the singularity point, where everybody is about as spread out as you realistically could get on a racetrack, whether or not it's just going to be a consistent stream of GTP drivers having to deal with GT3 traffic. I think we're certainly up to that point. These GT3 racers probably just sick and tired of always having a GTP car in their rearview mirror. I said that that would be the position that I'd want to be in right before we grab the green, but I don't think either position is good, frankly. You're always battling something, whether you're a GTP dealing with the rolling roadblocks, it feels like, that are GT3 cars, whether it be the GTPs, whether it be the GT3s, I should say, always dealing with a GTP car in their rearview mirror, looming ominously behind them.
Danny Fontaine has put down the new fastest lap of the race. That lasted by a 1 minute 12.950. And keep in mind, that is when he has got himself, a lot of dirty air with lap cars behind him. Imagine what he could do if he had a track that was a full clean air, right? So Fontaine, clearly one of the quickest GTPs on the racetrack, and Nicholas Pedersen relying on a lot of lap traffic to keep him sorted, but look at how many cars all of a sudden he's got between himself and the race leader, and that fight for the lead is gone because of it.
So now with the race lead not really in play for these racers, they just have to stay with it mentally. Don't lose track of how things could develop. We still have an hour and 27 left on the clock. There's so much that can go on in that period of time. An hour 27 from where I am in the city of Philadelphia. I can probably drive down to the Jersey Shore in that period of time, see about 17 car accidents, considering the quality of the drivers in my neck of the woods. In an hour and 27 minutes, you could put together a big jigsaw puzzle. You could do a lot of stuff in an hour and 27 minutes, as that was real close with that GT3 car right in front of the 515, who we saw run into some trouble through the hairpin not too terribly long ago, nearly running into the fence at Calamity Corner of 5.
Yeah, that got a little bit dicey. As well as that, Pack Simsport, Aris Racing, and Vulture Motorsports all have black flags, and one of those cars actually spun the wrong way. That's Keenan Wirtz for Aris Racing's Lamborghini, and he's just destroyed the rear wing. Then now that's going to turn into a meatball.
And that's a sad spectacle, looking at a Lamborghini without its rear wing. Oh, and more drama. That's Connor Boating in the Go-In Racing number 19 Ferrari. He's off through the parking lot section. That's coming out 9 through into 10. He's going to use the small little shortcut, potentially backing out of harm's way, trying to find a better spot to get that race car turned around. He gets it back up and rolling, finds the opportunity with that further incident. I thought he was going to back all the way up to that point in the road right there when it rejoins with the actual streets and maybe try and pull it down in pit lane to try and get turned around, but I think that was a smart call. Well played there.
I have to agree with you. Let's take a look back. This is what happened just seconds ago to the Lamborghini. A GT Pro tries to go down the inside and just... That's why you don't pass into that corner. It's just short and simple. That's why you don't pass. And I believe that was Thomas Fisher for the Vulture Motorsports' GT Pro that caused that. You see how long it took to get things sorted. Then while that was going on, you then had Go-In Racing be taken out by a fellow GTM, and that was a battle for position for 10th.
Oh, and that may get looked at potentially. That was a little bit unnecessary contact being made. Adding out of any turn is unnecessary, but that looked extra touch and go there. We got the Lamborghini rejoining the racetrack with the rear wing damage still. That I don't have a good feeling about, if I'm being honest. There was the contact. It's the lightest of touches as they head their way out there. Another part of this racetrack that does bottleneck a bit, which is really fresh considering the turn right before it bottlenecks quite a lot itself. Small little touch there having major consequences, and once again a driver with a small moment that would be easily recoverable on just about any other racetrack, snowballing into a massive loss of time for that Ferrari that got pitched into a spin.
I am really worried about this Lamborghini as well, honestly. We're going to see him come to pit road, and I hope he gets that rear wing fixed, because the problem that Caden Wirtz has, no rear downforce. And in 2024, we had a similar situation. We had a car strike the outside wall in turn 5. He got hit from behind. That caused him to lose the rear wing. He didn't know he lost the rear wing. Guess who immediately spun around to the very next corner and caused about a 4-car pileup, resulting in a caution. I mean, it's no rear wing. That's not something you want to really mess around with.
Oh, definitely not. The handling will go away lickety-split. You may think that's good heading down the straightaway, but then as soon as you hit the brakes and try and turn into any turn that's above about 50 miles an hour, the rear end's going to say, no, and you're just going to find the closest barrier. Even here, it's cranked up quite a lot. I would not want to be racing with the rear wing, even down the small little meandering bend on the start-finish straightaway. That's the quickest part of this racetrack by far. And a small little, adjustment of the steering wheel could end badly. If anyone's driven the Mercedes F1 cars, or any of the F1 cars that have DRS here on iRacing, and you head off into a turn with the rear wing open and just turn the steering wheel a matter of about like 10-15 degrees, you're going to see the racetrack that you just drove on in about a half a second. It's going to snap around that quickly. It's the exact same effect, frankly, with a slightly less darty front end, but the point still remains. That is sketchy, super, super sketchy, so I'm glad that car came down pit lane to try to repair the damage. And speaking of coming down pit lane, we got another raft of GT3 racers into the pit, and I believe these were the racers that came down in pit lane for the previous yellow, unless there are some stragglers left behind.
Looks like Jason Brothers actually had a drive-through to serve for the 10 incident point limit penalty, because he never actually stopped in his box, and he is off and away. That would be my assumption. So that's a constant thing you're hitting. I mean, that 10X, it's a drive-through every 10 incident points. This is something that was enforced as well, I believe, during the Daytona 24. It's a very, very harsh incident limit, but that is, of course, because VSCA wants to try and encourage clean racing as much as possible, and a harsh incident limit cap like that can oftentimes cause drivers to perhaps think twice.
Yeah, that it can, but I will say 10X in a 2-hour and 40-minute long race on Long Beach, managing your race to make sure you don't hit that limit, I feel like you'd have a better job trying to manage a bowling alley built on the moon. That is so incredibly tough. Daytona, that's challenging as well. But here at Long Beach, small little tap on the wall, going to give you an incident point. Small little tap of the car, going to give you a lot of incident points. 10X, I will give a world of credit to any teams who can make it to the end of this race without hitting that 10X limit. That is so tight of a window for them to try and run in, that if anyone could do it, I will give them personal props.
Well, the halfway point is coming up in just 60 seconds. It'll be an hour and 20 down and an hour and 20 to go. And quite the fight picking up here. This is for 9th and 10th. That's Rick Team Racing's Jose Barbosa trying to squeeze out Thomas Fisher on the right-hand side of the racetrack. The Porsche, though, down the inside of the BMW, and Fisher gonna put the squeeze on the Beamer now and force the issue. And that should see Vulture Motorsports back in the 9th.
I think that move may have been made slightly easy. I'm looking at the front end of that BMW. It looks like there may be a slight tweak to the front splitter, just barely noticeable. Yeah. I'm looking through it. Looks just, it is a minor bit of damage. As I said, in reference to the GTPs, that rings true in the GT3s. These are finely tuned race machines, so a small little bodywork nick, small little dent where there shouldn't be a dent, a raise in the front lip where it shouldn't be there, that can completely wreck the handling of your race car. I always thought that the Dallara F3 here on iRacing was one of the more aero-sensitive cars. Then I got into the realm of sports car racing, and they're both very sensitive and not sensitive at all. Your pace can go down the tubes if you have a small little tweak to the front splitter, but you can still run out there at a somewhat okay speed, even if your entire rear end is missing.
You want to talk about damage? How about Richard Bell? This car has been put through the ringer right now, absolutely no rear end, save for the diffuser, which is probably the one thing saving that car's rear end stability right now, along with the rear wing, and a lot of damage to the grille as well. And yet, Ron, second place in the class.
Yeah, and just as I was saying that if you have a small little bit of damage, it's going to wreck your pace. But even if you have a huge amount of damage, you could somehow be okay. Thankfully for Richard Bell, that diffuser is still in place. Now, if the diffuser fell off, this car would be driving around like a declawed cat climbing up an igloo. Thankfully for him, however, he's still running in P2, keeping that pace strong. Now, granted, John Santoro, the McLaren running in the top spot in GTM at the moment, has just checked out to nearly 5 seconds as the gap at the current moment. It's still P2 for Richard Bell at the moment. Now, you do have to think about the cars a little bit farther behind, but there's only one more racer in that GTM field. It's Chris Cadence in that BMW. He's running in third at the moment, just behind. And then from there, you have to look at Ben Winter, Ryan Robertson, Lucas Santos, and Jason Brothers, all about one lap down in that category. So there's a lot of drivers in that field that can't really have too much of a saying power in how it actually goes. I will amend my statement there. I was actually looking at some races a little bit farther down, as that's a 57 in GT Pro around.
Curtis Treiber having an incident for double stint racing. This is what happened to him, and I'm willing to bet just getting loose up over the curbs. It is the age-old story. Yep, sure enough. He saw the back end kick up, and oh, that's a pretty nasty hit into the inside wall. He nearly backed up and took out a few others.
You mentioned a bit earlier on in the broadcast talking about the incident at Daytona when a driver's throttle hung. They hit the tire bundles and bounced back onto the road. Very lucky that didn't end up being a sort of second verse, same as the first incident heading out of 5. Hard contact with the concrete barriers. That's probably going to result in some major front-end damage, either huge aero damage or huge suspension damage. Either way, if the case still remains, the pace in that car is probably going to fall away. We've settled into a groove in this race for the most part here, Nolan. We're seeing everybody just try and whittle the laps away, go through their stint, and once we get to the final hour, which we are very close to with 1 hour and 16 minutes more or less left on the clock, we're going to start to see the pot begin to boil over.
Oh, we sure will, and I tell you what, this field has got a lot of energy still underneath it, and I think, pleasantly surprisingly, only one full course yellow. I was anticipating at least 2 or 3, so the fact we've been able to get out of this with only one so far, it does speak to the level of driving that these guys have been able to put on, and the resilience that this field has shown.
Yeah, that is one word that I really like you raise in there, resilience. This has been a resilient field. Even the drivers that we saw run into trouble right at the start. I mean, take Chris Katz as a good example. We saw that team run into some trouble pretty much right off the bat. I think they had a black flag to serve right from the get-go. They're running third at the moment in GTM, so talk about a fight back there. We still have this fighting going on. I believe that's the 747 Mustang that we follow at the moment, losing out on some time, losing out in some places. Not sure if they're a lap down, but the point remains either way that if you can just stay with it throughout these races, doesn't matter what sort of drama and chaos you have to endure to get to the very end. It's like climbing a mountain. Even if you stub your toe, twist your ankle, you get a couple of scrapes on your knees, if you make it to the summit, the journey to get there isn't going to matter too terribly much as long as you can make it to the summit first.
An hour and 15 minutes to go. Let's ride on board with Danny Fonte as we'll let you feel the noise of the Long Beach street circuit, and we'll be with you in just a few more minutes as we work our way closer to the final hour of the first sprint race of the season. Well, pit stops have come and mostly gone for the GTP field. Still a few drivers that have yet to come down to pit road. Right as we cut away, Ron, I was mentioning kind of behind the scenes how impressed I was at how we had only come out of this with one safety car and how clean it had been. And, well, literally as I was saying that, this happened.
Yeah, so this was the rare occasion of the off-air commentator jinx. I've done it before, and this was the first time I've seen someone else do it. That was the 9 going for a spin, heading off through turn number 6. We don't really talk about that turn too much, but very tricky. A bit of a bump through the turn, and contact being made. That was the number 19, Nicholas Goen, beyond the wheel. The Goen racing effort, running into the side. Don't think there's too much severe damage on the front of this Ferrari, as they're still running out there on the racetrack at full song. I think it's just a slight tweak, some decals slightly askew and slightly scraped up, but that could have been a heck of a lot worse. And if we got perfect angle right as it happened with your at one point now GTP leader, got a fantastic view of that right as it was taking place through 6.
And Alvaro Martinez into the car for World of Sim Racing Team should be the race leader by the time they get back out of pit road. Selena Ward, meanwhile, has jumped in for VSCA Racing. Felipe Silveira into the car for Delta Racing. Surleck still in the car for Twin SR by Rebecca Bornheim. So still quite a few drivers out here that are putting the work in for their teams. 2 drivers that are right now nose to tail, Rick Team Racing and iRacing Today Motorsports. That's Jose Barbosa and Chad Dalton, but they are off cycle by about 14 laps on each other's pit stop window here.
And we saw, as a result of that first yellow, the GT field splitting kind of down the middle. I think there was a bit of imbalance there, but more or less splitting right down the middle of drivers who came down pit lane during that yellow, others who have stayed out. And when it comes to endurance racing, even in these sprint races at 2 hours and 40 minutes long, that first pit cycle, that first pit call, that can snowball from there. It can either snowball in a good way and have a very satisfying crash off a cliff at the very end. Sometimes it can end in absolute disaster and knock somebody's poor wooden cabin down. Now, whether that works out well for the racers who came down pit lane during that first yellow, or whether it works in the favor of the drivers who stayed out, which we talked about not too long ago, maybe that was the best call to make. We'll just have to find out as time develops throughout this race. So Michael James in the Superstar Racing Team number 4 car, very slow, and I think there is some damage on that race car as we see heading off through the first sector. I believe this was on the out lap, out of 4 through into 5. And it's just very, very slow.
The damage is already there, so I don't know what may have brought this about. We might have found it, though. Kind of going on a bit of a fishing expedition. This is right out of pit road, and already the damage is there.
I wonder if it was contact with a wall on like pit lane itself, because there are some jagged walls that stick out there, because there's a front end damage. This is quite strange.
I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that is fresh out of pit road, and I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to begin looking for that, because you'd think if he caught a leading edge on the wall, he would be on the side, not the front.
Yes, I'm looking into it right now, trying to figure out exactly where that damage was picked up. I'm seeing that even before the pit stops arrived, there was damage on the front end of that number 4 car. So I think it's just trying to get a grips to it, very slow on the first couple laps, maybe trying to get the tires up to temperature, whatever the case may be. Very slow at the moment for the 4.
I mean, I understand wanting to get to the 10, but he's lost his team 5 spots since he's come out of pit road, so he's got to get a move on here, or he could be going a lap down.
Yeah, this is very bizarre, because I'm going through, I'm back now to about lap 30, so this is very far back in this race, folks, over a half of the distance ago, and that front end damage was still there. So either something else went down that maybe caused a wheel to go slightly awry, either rear wheel or front wheel, and it's just causing him to lose a boatload of time. We're just not able to settle into a groove. This is bizarre that we're seeing this from that driver, the number 4 car, because that team was running pretty all right in the in their class at the time, but things just snowballing in the worst possible way.
fights on for the 8th place spot here, and boy, near contact between Rusty Spatula's Racing and Virtual Power Sim Racing. And I thought for sure we were about to see a car turn in the middle of Shoreline Drive. Down the inside goes the number 77, forces the issue, and he gets through.
Yeah, so that's not the first time that we've seen some aggressive driving with some lap traffic playing a role in it. I mean, in the first the first lap traffic cycle, I should say, in this exact part of the racetrack, we saw racers go 4 wide. So can't say it's too alien, but it is still quite shocking nonetheless. One kind of theory that I always have, talking about endurance racing and the traffic dilemma that goes on as a result, I always have to worry about the game of lap traffic chicken, as I've coined it. A GTP driver seeing one go for a gutsy move right up in front of them and just snowballs out of control from there. We've seen a little bit of that thus far here in this race, but I think the main points of contention have just been these racers in the GT3s continuing to battle even with that never-ending stream of GTP traffic trying to negotiate them lickety-split.
And then this moment for Bloco Motore Sim Sports, Steven Armenides. Oh boy, up over the rise, a massive tank slapper, and then went nose first into the right side wall.
Three with a very odd approach off through turn number 9. I thought that was nearly an incident. Interesting to see how these racers run the curbs. We talked about the one on the inside of turn number 5 in the infamous moment a couple of years ago when IndyCar tried to mess with the curbs a bit and it backfired, and we saw a couple of accidents take place in the very first practice session. Don't see any sort of curb changes here on this iRacing scan. Since it is a laser scan, they would have to rescan that part of the racetrack entirely to make any sort of change, I believe. But these racers still having mixed opinions on the curb, and there is a mixed set of curbs that you have around this racetrack. You have the ones that are really raised up, like the one on the inside turn number 1, which is pretty much just on a residential sidewalk. And you've got the ones like turn number 5 that are really, really close. So speaking of a close call, that's Caleb Koski in the number 2 Acura GTP, nearly running into blows with a GT3 right up in front of him. Getting back to the subject of the curbs, there's so many different types of curbs that you've got out here on the racetrack. Some of them you can smash your shock absorbers on from the drop of the green through to the fall of the checkered. Others you won't even want to touch with a 10-foot pole.
Turn 5 is the one that you don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole, but you have to, because otherwise you're going to be losing whole seconds a lap with how little momentum you're going to be gaining down that straight. So it's like I said, I think there's a third type of curve as well. Some you want to ramp off of, some you want to not touch, and some you just got to bite the bullet and hope for the best.
I think the way that I could sum it up in terms of the curbs, it's all or nothing. I always say, talking about the bus stop at Watkins Glen and the drivers having to hit the curbs through there, you can say once again off through turn number 5, there's kind of touch and go sections, for lack of a better term, where you either completely whack over the curbs, destroy your suspension, but you're going to gain the time and really make inroads on drivers who avoid the curbs, or you're just going to not touch them at all. If you get the inside tires a little bit askew, if you get those up in the air while the tires on the outside are still planted, that's when these race cars do their best impression of, I believe it's the RMS Queen Victoria in the Long Beach Bay. That's when you see a race car turn into a boat and also get turned into an unrecognizable pile of metal and carbon fiber pulp on the outside when they inevitably hit the fence.
Three-way scrap for second place here in GTM is underway, and of course the third car in line not on cycle with the top 2. So off the Estes Racing's Matthew Elliott will not be in a realistic fight for position because he's going to have to come down pit road pretty soon here within the next half hour. Meanwhile, Kevin Smith and Sam Vaughn for Intercom Fisher Motorsports and BMW M Team GSR, they are both definitely for position. They're on a similar strategy, only 3 laps differentiating the two. And right now, Sam Vaughn actually 3 laps pressure on the tires, but does not seem like those are working for him too well.
so not getting into a groove at all. And we talk about the mental side of things, as we have done a lot throughout this show. If for the entirety of a stint you're not really feeling with it, you're not getting the vibe down too well. I could best compare it to our side of things here, Nolan, on a broadcast. If we start off a show, guns blazing, all the juices are flowing, the vocal cords are doing everything they need to do, our brain is working at the right time, that's when it's going to be a really fun show. But we've all been in that situation where just something doesn't feel right, either something's going on outside of things, you just don't really get into that groove, and it just feels like a struggle and a claw through the entirety of an event. It happens for these drivers. If you start off a stint on the wrong foot and you don't feel comfortable, it is going to feel like this hour-long stint, or whatever length it may be, it's going to feel like you're driving out there on the racetrack for like 3 days.
Oh, for sure, and that is why it is so critical to keep your focus, and it's critical for the teammates of these drivers to help their guys keep focused. Because you got to also keep in mind, these guys do have a mandatory human spotter rule, and with the mandatory driver changes, well, it makes sense. Whoever's not driving the car, you're now on spotter duty. So it is that person that needs to ensure that the focus is always there for your driver, so that way they can maintain that concentration and hit their marks. Because we've seen what a lapse in concentration can do a few times throughout this race. All it takes is just a split second. We're talking maybe a tenth of a second turning in earlier than anticipated, and that's still enough to cause a car to strike a wall.
And now, breaking away from that discussion, I want to commend some of these racers that immediately get out of the cockpit and jump on top of the spotter stand. That's a tough job in its own right, so props where props they most certainly due for pulling off double duty in those drivers' cases. Looking back to the discussion about the racing out there on the circuit, here's a battle for second that we've been keeping our eyes on for quite some time. Sam Vaughn, who we ride on board with in this number 3 BMW, running in P3 at the moment. In GTM, very close to contact with the back of Kevin Smith in that number 90 Porsche right up in front. That's the Intercomp Fisher Motorsports effort. That contact can cause them to spread out a little bit. A bad run for the BMW M Team TSR effort onto the start-finish straightaway. But this battle certainly going to intensify, and I think these racers may start to bring up the wick just because Lucas Santos is so farther up the road. They think, at this point, why not battle for second?
Under an hour of racing left to go here this afternoon as the battles continue throughout this track. You see a bit of a bobbler from Sam Vaughn, and boy, Vaughn is really pressuring Kevin Smith. Now looks to the inside at turn 6, covered off down the inside, and boy, Smith tried to fight back, but Vaughn stuck it in there and just barely made it stick. Now Smith having to fend off Matthew Elliott rather than trying to fight back, and we got a car around. That is Curtis Treiber for Double Stint Racing.
Yeah, this has been a very, very poor set of circumstances for the number 57. As of recent, we've seen that driver, of course, just had that spin a few moments ago, ran into some trouble soon, and here's a battle now for the lead in GT Pro. Right as we saw that moment hang out of turn number 8, we've got this battle now with Tyler Redden in the Aston Martin, getting a move done on Carlos Gomil in the Acura. That's a swapperoo up in the front. These two running at a zip code all of their own. And there we go, a swap at the front of GT Pro.
Huge news there, and Blocco Motore Sim Sport on top here in the Sports Car Grand Prix of Long Beach. Blocco Motore Sim Sport, they finished 6th place, 42 seconds back in the Daytona 24 after they had been formerly fighting for the top spot in that race, and met with some misfortunes there as well. It would be such a turnaround to see them come home here and take a race win, but he took a lot of curve there. You got to be careful with that, because that could easily net you a slowdown.
Yeah, that's another thing, talking about the curbs around this racetrack. It being a street circuit, you don't have to consider the slowdowns often, but the areas that you do have to do it, it is very easy to catch a slowdown off through 5 into turn number 1. Haven't seen a driver get met with that thus far, but the other runoff into turn number 1, if you run a bit too far into pit exit, you're going to pick up a slowdown. The inverse is true if you're a driver on a pit exit trying to rejoin the racetrack. It is just a mess of painted lines heading off into turn number 1. If you miscue with any of them, you're going to get a penalty. We haven't seen a driver get struck with that yet here in this race, I believe, but very easy for that to take place as this battle is really getting nuts for 5th and GT Pro. We just saw the Rick Team Racing number 88 car get a move done, and now we still have the side-by-side racing between the 77 on the inside and the 157 Aston Martin on the outside through 9. That's going to be a swap-a-roo there with the Virtual Power Sim Racing Porsche jumping into that P6 spot.
And now it's Porsche on BMW. You saw the tires smoking up there as he tried to get the hammer down out of that final corner. That stalls out the run for Tomas Silva, allowing Barbosa to start to pull away. Chad Dalton wants to go back on offense, and oh boy, I don't know if you can do that. That was a pretty nasty block there from the 77 coming down the front straightaway.
We were thinking that in the final hour of this race, the aggression was going to build, and whether it be drivers on the offense or drivers on the defense, that aggression is starting to get hotter and hotter with every passing lap. Let's take a look at this replay, seeing the maneuvers off into turn number 1. This is the longest straightaway on this racetrack by a country mile, and if you can get a good run off into here, you are going to be golden. Look at that, though, moving a little bit in the braking zone. That is going to be borderline.
Yeah, it's one of the situations you're typically allow one blocking move. There's a move to the inside and then another back onto the racing line. And an argument could be made, well, he was just trying to set himself up for the corner. That's true, but still have to be wary of that. Although that could be one of those matters that won't be looked at unless it gets protested by that Aston Martin. And at this point in the race, I mean, you can already see started to drop back. I don't think it's something that would, for lack of a better term, it wouldn't be worth it because you only have a limited number of challenges per race.
You know, if I'm honest, looking at that, it's a little bit naughty. It's a teeny, it's a bit iffy, but it's not the worst sort of offense that you can have. It's kind of like jaywalking in an odd way. You know, you should do it. It's technically against the law. But if somebody pulls you over and gives you a ticket for jaywalking, you gotta wonder what they're really doing on their shift. So that's the way that I see it personally. Odd comparison to be sure, but I think the other point still remains that now if it happens again, we'll probably have to bring up this discussion under a slightly more harsher tone. For now, though, I think the 77 is more worried about getting a move done on the 88 than the 77 is worried about the car right in tow.
He's going to have a run here into Firestone, but he is not going to go for the lunge. So Tomas Silva remains in line, but Jose Barbosa still in that BMW, doing a good job on playing defense here. There's the run, though, coming out of the corner, and Tomas Silva thought he might have the inside out of the final corner. Didn't get it, though, but he's got a lot of slipstream all the way down Shoreline Drive through Toyota and down into turn number 1. Is he going to go for the dive? He looks to the inside, but he chooses not to go for it. Oh, he does go for it! He scared the BMW wide! And there's the mind games that we were talking about earlier!
Force a driver into a mistake and you can make anything work. A move into turn number 1 off the back of a mistake. That is how you play it. The 77 now jumping out in tow on the other side of the curb, though. Got to be wary about that, as let's take a look at this replay. Off through the hairpin. It was already close through here. Then when they came across the stripe, look at the gap, about a car length between those two cars as they head their way. Tucked in the draft, tucked in the slipstream, pulls that to the inside, doesn't go for the move, but spooks the 88 enough whereby they miss the apex. And look at that, ever the opportunist, slipping down the inside like a slip and slide, and there we go. That's how he got a move done at Long Beach.
Talk about faking out your opponent. He faked him twice. He's like, I'm gonna go for it. No, actually, I'm not. Actually, you know what? I think I will go for it. I mean, that is so cheeky, but hey, it was a clean pass, no contact. It's within track limits. All's fair in love and war.
Yeah, that right there is just fantastic. opportunistic driving. That is what that is. Saw the gap develop, saw that driver run wide. That's how quickly you have to think behind the wheel of a race car. If you see a small little trip up, a small little moment, to be quick on the feet, quick on the gun, to say, okay, yep, there's a spot to get it done, and you got it done right there. Oh, that's the 2 with the spin heading off through turn number 5. And that was the 3 car that we saw running in the podium spot in GTM. Sam Vaughn behind the wheel of that effort. He hasn't been able to pull it back into the pits. He's in the runoff area on the outside of turn number 8. And depending on how this works out here, Nolan, we could very well find ourselves under yellow for the second time.
And that would be with under an hour to go as well. That would be absolutely massive. That car is tumbling down the order. He is waiting on the go-ahead, because you do need to wait for race control to give you the approval to tow. And if they deem that he's in a dangerous enough spot, they could stop this race again. And they are going to allow him to get the tow back to pit row. Fights over the overall lead as well. Where the heck has Selena Ward come from as she's starting to pressure Alvaro Martinez?
Yeah, so right as we get into the final hour, we've been talking all throughout this broadcast about how the attention was going to be on this final sprint to the end. And speak of the devil, here we are. We've got some fantastic fighting in this pack. Drivers battling in GTP, drivers battling in GT Pro, drivers battling in GTM. The complexion of this race is still right about the same, but it has been turned on its head a decent amount. And even up the front in this battle as well, we got to consider that Alvaro Martinez has lost out on some time. Selena Ward in that number 32 Ferrari is within a second and closing up that gap forevermore. So we could very well find ourselves starting to battle in all 3 of our classes, battling not only for the top spots, well, outside of GT Pro where it is quite spread out at the moment, but certainly in GTP, this is going to get tense.
Oh, and heads up, a lot of GT traffic to work through now, and part of why Martinez is being held up is because that GTP in front of Martinez, that is lap traffic that is just not letting him through, which is causing havoc for Martinez. No, Selena Ward almost loses the back end, and just like that, a sneak attack from Felipe Silveira sees the number 21 punch through into second.
Yeah, I was just going to say, how long is it until the drivers farther behind begin to pounce? Because at a racetrack like this, the battling will slow you down so much, but slowing you down even more will be a mistake. So now Silveira in that BMW jumping into that top spot. We're going to take a look at a replay to see that drama taking place, heading our way off through the found section just then, off through turn at number 4 into 5 right now. Silveira going for the dive off through the turn, and that's another opportunistic move. That's how you do it.
And Selena Ward clearly never saw it coming. A huge host of GT Pro traffic now into pit row for their final stops on the afternoon, making their way out of the racetrack. Barbosa remains in the car, and it looks like that will be a similar case for most of the contenders. These are, again, the drivers that came down under the full course yellow over an hour ago. But they are now good to go the distance, and now that fight for the GTP lead, it has broken up a little bit. But give it some time with lap traffic, it can close up again.
Yeah, one small little change, one small little mistake, and you're going to see that battle completely get turned up on its head. GT Pro now close up once more because of the other. It's probably going to be some of the final pit stops, the final pit cycle now officially upon us. Getting close to the final 45 minutes of this 2-hour and 40-minute long race. And, you know, Nolan, we were thinking about how chaotic it could be off the back of the 24-hour long race at Daytona. It is a shock to go from 24 hours to 2 hours and 40 minutes. That is a huge change. But these racers, on the whole, outside of a couple of mistakes, a couple of blips every now and then, it has been a very smooth way to get this Sprint Cup up and rolling here in 2026.
Oh, and it's exactly what we love to see, right? And I think everyone is going to love a race that is intense. It's got a lot of action, but you know, they are still able to more or less keep it clean, barring a few incidents here and there. You know, we talked about the fights for the GTP lead, which just closed in a healthy handful. We talked about the GT Pro lead, but you also have the GT Am lead that's closing in. Matthew Elliott brought for the SS Racing within a second now of Kevin Smith.
The wonderful thing about endurance racing, it's the endurance racing magnet. As we get closer to that checkered flag, the field going to get closed right back up to one another. It's closed at the front of GTM. One small little trip up from that number 90, as that's a 57 into the fence. Chris Schreiber has had a torrid time in this stint of the race. That 57 had a spin heading out of turn number 8 not too terribly long ago. This time finds the barrier. Gotta wonder what the damage is on that machine. May have already been slightly wounded. See, it looked like the rear suspension was slightly askew.
Oh boy!
Taking place, actually hit the wall on the inside, and some more racers in the GT3s, the drivers right behind, actually touching into one another. I believe that was, couldn't identify who the Porsche and Mercedes were that touch, but I think I saw a bumper fly there.
So SimCity Racing's Aiden Campbell is the driver that got knocked, and unfortunately he's in the pit road because of that, because that put him over the incident limit. However, the car that ran into him was one of the GTM Mercedes, I believe. Looking around, trying to find which one it was. Well, this one has a front bumper, so we know it wasn't that car. It was one of the white machines. I believe it may have been one of the Wolf Motorsport sim racing contenders.
Either way, slice it, turn 8 striking once again. I said that was going to be a trouble point, and it certainly has been, although kind of labeling one singular trouble point on this racetrack would be a bit redundant. They've all been very tricky. Nolan, I'm going to pass this back off to you with an odd question. Whenever you see broadcasts here of races here at Long Beach, or whenever you drive around this racetrack yourself, what would you say is the consistently toughest turn for racers to try and manage?
Ooh, that's a good one. There's a lot of them. Turn 5 for the sheer number of incidents that I've had personally coming up over the rise there. But in general, I feel like the Fountain section, because that is one of those corners where it is just an enigma. There we go. But, I mean, you look at this area, right? I mean, look at how awkward this whole complex is. It's one of those corners where you could hit the absolute perfect line here and still feel like you did something wrong.
Yeah, that's always so frustrating whenever you're behind the wheel. Feel like, I did everything right. What happened? It's like when you study for a test in school and then you still end up walking out of it with like a D or a C. You're going to be like, what? I did everything right. You're going to be running through your own brain and kind of second guessing yourself. I like the way that you put that there, Nolan. It is a true enigma, heading your way all through the fan section. Some strong circumstances as well. I've heard this be said about the races in real life, both with IMSA and IndyCar. I've heard that if you do run off into the fan section and knock down some of the flowers, you will both get a bill in the mail from the aquarium, and the aquarium staff will find a fish from the aquarium and smack you over the face with it.
One of those, I believe. The other one, it could be just an extra deterrent.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get a bill. Yeah, the fish thing, totally understandable. That definitely has happened. But yeah, that's probably a lengthy bill, because those are some very well-groomed and good flowers too. If anyone ever goes into the gardening section of like a Lowe's or Home Depot, if you're somebody who's looking to redo a garden, you're going to walk out of that with a hole in your wallet.
How big do you think that bill would be? A couple thousand, maybe?
It depends on the damage. Depends on the race car. You know, I was actually, I was looking back on some old sports car clips, and one of them was Grand Am, an old Grand Am clip. I believe it was John Pugh at the Grand Am race at Barbara Motorsports Park in 2012, heading off into, I believe it's the 6, 7, and 8 chicane right by the museum, and he tried to avoid a spinning Mazda RX-8, I think it was. went off in the grass, and the nose just completely dug in, and he came to a stop. It is one of the goofiest, like, cartoon-looking collisions in the entirety of racing history. But I can't even imagine what the landscaping crew billed him for that, because that looked like they would have to completely redo that entire runoff area, because that car dug in deep.
Yeah, it that'll do it for sure. Jack Hitchcock's, meanwhile, looking to go on offense here against Adrian Alonso for 11th in GT Pro. And a big duck to the inside down Seaside Way. GTP is going to work their way through the melee. And Going Racing picks off World of Sim Racing.
Again, the move's done. We're getting it to the point where any small little time that you can gain, it snowballs from the tropical green through to the fall of the checker, but it's going to feel extra important now. The time is running out. There's less things in these drivers' control. At this point, there are some teams that are maybe looking back on things that happened a little bit earlier on and thinking what could have been. You know, one team that I think is kind of considering that at the present moment is Selena Ward in that number 32 Ferrari stable, running in third at the moment in GTP. Now, we saw that battle get really close up at the front overall. Now, however, your top two in class, which is now Felipe Silveira, holding on to second at the moment instead of Selena Ward. You gotta be thinking at this moment, you know, what could have been? There's still time left to go in this race, but we're in the final 40 minutes, and we started off with 2 hours and 40 minutes. So that small little mistake, that small little move that got put on as a result of all that, that's a number 2 car once again on the runoff area into turn number 8, this time without a front clip. But Selena Ward and that number 32 Wastegate Racing stable, maybe looking back on that and thinking what could have been, is that is actually much more severe damage on that 2 car than I originally thought.
Yeah, heads up on that one for the field coming through here. Caleb Koski with the right front completely disconnected, somehow able to more or less navigate the car, but look out as he cuts off a McLaren. Oh, what are we doing here, guys? And these GT cars are going to be livid with Koski for that one.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much they could have done about it, though. Certainly the GT3 driver is going to be irate at that situation, but there's one wheel that's broken off of that GTP car, and I'm sure some major suspension damage that makes that other front tire not very effective in terms of steering the race car. So not sure there's too much that the number 2 car could have done there as we take a look at the replay to see what took place here. Big front lockup, huge front lockup into the tire bundles he's going to go. The tire bundles, I mean, they're not soft and cuddly in real life either, but in the sim, they're basically made out of tungsten.
It's, yeah, and you saw what he tried to do. He tried to turn left to head to the runoff area, but just wasn't able to get in. And I understand what he's trying to limit back, and I have sympathies for him being slow, right? I mean, he's trying to keep the car from further damage, but the big argument that I would have for that one is don't turn into the racing line when you're that slow. I mean, he's got to have a human spotter that tells him, hey, you got a lot of traffic coming up on you. I would have pulled to the right, let them through, then cut back down to make that turn work, because that was not the way to go about it, and it checked up a lot of drivers. That could have been a very nasty incident.
I believe the correct technical term that they teach in the Columbia School of Broadcasting is that is a code brown moment heading off through the final sector for those GT3 drivers. Very lucky that they escaped that without any further incident. Here's the number 96. That's a runoff area dive into turn number 6. The braking zones throughout this race, I've seen it become more and more of a point of contention. I think part of the reason why that is the case, we are, you can see this track kind of covered in an orange California summery haze that we didn't get earlier on. We are running out of daylight, and I'm sure the track conditions are evolving not for the better. I think that could be the reason why these racers are starting to struggle a bit more in the braking zones, especially in the GTP field with no ABS. Well, less ABS, I should say.
I want to kind of get another look at that moment here as Koski made his way through, and I'll tell you what, he's doing a pretty good job here at least maintaining a relatively reasonable pace, considering he had to take the racing line, but then you jump back to the McLaren and he sees the slowing car, thinks, okay, well, I'll probably just go to the left then. Nope. And yikes. And that, of course, stacks him up right into the Porsche behind, and then he gets cut off at the exit of the corner. That was Eric Terry Hogg from the Vulture Motorsports crew, yet another driver that used to run under the banners of Screech and Boost Motorsports.
You know, the very surface level thing to take out of all that, I'll say it anyways, you don't need to be a physicist to know that a McLaren running into the back, pretty much all the way into the engine compartment of an Acura GTP car, that would be ugly, and that's nearly what happened as they headed their way off through that sector. I gotta say, talking about the final portion of this lap, and I am hoping this is not going to result in the worst commentator jinx that I've pulled off in my entire broadcasting career. We haven't seen the hairpin get too crazy. We have seen a little bit of craziness, but we haven't seen a track blocker yet.
Oh, God.
I'm gonna leave that open. I'm gonna leave that because you can never say never.
What have you done? What have you done?
Probably something terrible.
What have you done? Oh, dear.
I become Death, the destroyer of worlds.
Oh, boy. Well, I mean, we've had quite a few commentators jinx a jinx streak throughout the course of Green Flag TV's long history as SimCity Racing losing out a place to Doubleson Racing, and boy, it's how the mighty have fallen for Aiden Campbell and crew. That 71 car has damage, clearly not up to scratch anymore. The car is just trying to limp around and get some extra points in, but for a team that used to be leading this race, this one's got to sting.
Yeah, it almost feels like a humiliation ritual, in a sense, running this far back after running up in the front earlier on. In endurance racing, you've got the mountains and you've got the valleys, and they find themselves in a valley right now, but as long as they can keep their spirits high, heading off into the next round of the championship, I don't think it'll sting too terribly much. Certainly going to feel the burn right now as we get to the very end. They're probably just hoping to negotiate the final 34 minutes of this race as smoothly as they can without any further incident and try and make up as much time as they possibly can. I will say, based off the comment I made one lap ago, if that does result in a pileup heading off through the turn, see, I'm hoping that's a bit of like reverse psychology. Like I say that could happen and that doesn't actually happen. If I said it's not going to happen, that would be when it would happen. But if it does result in a commentator jinx, Nolan, I'll let you give the email address. But if anyone would like my job here on Green Flag TV, want to write to us and mark your email, I would like that redhead job. Thank you very much.
Stefan Knowles for Unitronic Fisher Motorsports under fire for 10th place in GT Pro, courtesy of Jack Hedgecox in Going Racing. And we talked about going quite a bit at Daytona. They used to be an LMP2 team. They absolutely dominated the LMP2 category in 2024, taking the win in over half the races. So they made the jump into the GT field, and they have not had the best of afternoons here in this one. I mean, their pro car running all the way back in 11th, and you see him actually sweep driving to the outside for the top 10. That is a brave lunge and nearly caught the tires.
Yeah, the tire barrier on the outside, turn number 8, looms ominously once again, but thankfully for these drivers, they get away without having their head chopped off by the beast. Let's see, though. They still have some time left to go in this race, and the handling is starting to fall away. It's getting more froggy and frenetic out there on the circuit as well. Just saw some side-by-side racing into the hairpin. That's playing with fire if ever it has been seen before. I don't know. It feels like we're heading to a point here, Nolan. We're getting closer to the end. Drivers turning up that wick of aggression lap after lap. Really turn after turn, it's getting to the point. And with these battles getting close and drivers looking to start off the season on the right foot, even though we're in round number 2, I don't know, I just feel like we're coming to a head in a bad way.
But you saw Stefan Knowles pull right behind Hedgecox and give a flash of the headlights down the down Seaside Way. So clearly Knowles was not happy about Jack Hedgecox taking that pass around the outside. Well, it is what it is, but hey, again, the pass was clean. It's not Hedgecox's fault that Knowles left the door open to go down the outside, and well, best way to go about it is to try to just race back and try again a bit further down the line. And, yeah, careful. So right now, Hedgecock's trying to get around Superstar Race Team. That is Michael James, one of the AM-class drivers. And so this is not for a class position, but you can tell he is still kind of struggling. He wants to get around him quickly before Noble's going to close the gap.
And I wonder what sort of strategy these racers are going to try and implement as we get to the end. Of course, the pit strategy has been massive ever since it dropped the green. But now you got to think about the strategy out there on the circuit. When to push, when to pounce. Are you going to try and get the moves done in the next 15 minutes or in the final 15 minutes? That's what matters, and that can make or break your race here. Drivers still saying quick times all throughout the field. But we're getting to the point where there is a little bit of scheming going on in these racers and these teams' minds. Oh, that's so close to contact through 5.
Yeah, Hedgecock wants to get through. He sees Nose behind him, and the McLaren of Michael James, I think, got the memo on that one. Decided to take the wise move and back out. So we'll watch that fight closely, see if it closes in again. Realistically, that fight between Go and the Unitronic Fisher Motorsports, that is the only actual battle right now on track within a class that is under a second right now. Everybody else has been spread apart. There are a few position battles elsewhere, but it is almost always for spots that are in overall position, not for class, and therefore the points would not matter as much. The furthest up of which would be Chad Dalton trying to hold on against Kevin Smith, who is right now the GTM class leader.
Yes, as we get into crunch time, the race is starting to really come to a head. Everybody trying to peak at the right time. One team that has had a wild series of events was briefly running in a podium spot in one of the GT3 categories, but ever since then, things have kind of fallen to the wayside. Nolan, we have Chris Cadets looking to have a chat with us, so I'll pass Mike off to you. He's a teammate to Sam Vaughn, who's currently running 12th at the moment in GTM. They were running in a good spot, and then drama breaking out around them has cost them a good shot at doing well. So I'll pass the mic off to you to have a chat with the man who started off this race for the team.
Yeah, top break for the BMW M Team TSR crew, currently running back in the number 12 spot at GTM. Chris, a tough fight. You guys are looking to be having quite the fight up front. What happened to the race?
Yeah, this one is extremely disappointing. All weekend we've been struggling to really extract raw pace from the car, and we were confident that we'd be able to race well, though. And we made a little mistake in this one after qualifying. Ended up starting from the pits for this one, so we lost a lap early. The safety car really helped us get back into position for contention, and things were looking good. I mean, man, I was really happy with it in my stint. I was able to make some decent overtakes, and then turning the car over to Sam, really liked our chances. Really thought after the podium at Daytona that we were on for podium or better this time. I don't know. All I'll say is I think it's pretty apparent there are certain teams that put in a lot of preparation, and there are others that don't. And that's unfortunate when others have to pay the price. But, you know, we'll look forward to Sebring, and we think that'll be a good track for us. That's what we look forward to now. We'll see.
Daytona proved to be a strong track for you guys, and you, of course, have high hopes for Sebring. So it looks like your Endurance Cup is at least off to a relatively good start across the BMW M Team TSR board here across all classes. What do you think is going to be the main goals, though, when we get set to take to the next Sprint Cup race? Do you plan on seeing if you can bounce back?
Well, yeah, certainly. I mean, I think one of the things we really need to do better with, and I need to do better with, is just getting the car in a better position early on in the race, as far as qualifying a bit better. But you know, when it comes to the rest of the season, I mean, Sebring we think will be a good track, and then the other sprint events. It's a long season. And it can certainly come back to us. But this one hurts because we were in a hole. Early on in this race, and then things were coming our way, and we were about 15 seconds back from the leader, but we were closing in. Sam in the car now, he was doing some really nice lap times, but you know, sometimes things happen. you're really on the edge in certain corners here. You really don't have a clean view of what's going on the other side. There's really just no time to react. He tried to pinch it down and slow it, go around to the right, but wasn't enough. So we have some good tracks coming up ahead, and we'll look to the future.
Sebring, when we last covered this league in 2024, proved to be interesting from the fact that it was the first ever race on the channel and a VSCA that featured rain. Do you anticipate a wet weather forecast going into Sebring, or if we do, how do you plan on handling it?
I wouldn't anticipate it. I mean, have to be prepared for everything, of course, but just knowing the weather for Sebring that time of year, that was pretty uncharacteristic to have rain that time. So I wouldn't be looking for that, but it's certainly something that we'll have to be prepared for. It's an adjustment for us this year, just being in the GT3, the GTM. In years prior, we were exclusively in the LMP2. You know, just being in the slowest class and having to manage traffic in a different way has been a new challenge, but it's been fun. I think the car has suited us well so far, and I really think the bumps of Sebring, that will suit BMW well also. So should be a good one, but we'll see.
Well, we'll wish you the best of luck then throughout the 12 hours of Sebring and the next Sprint Cup race. And who knows, maybe the next time we're speaking to you guys, it'll be as a class winner. We'll see you later.
I would love to see it. Well, thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of the race.
Chris Cadiz from the BMW M Team TSR and their GTM competitor. Having quite the moment. And Ron, another car having a moment, Intercom Fisher Motorsports. They were backwards, but in pit road, which tells a story that came only 30 seconds after this spin gave them a drive-through penalty for hitting the incident limit.
Yeah, so let's take a look at the spin. This has big consequences for their race here in the GT3s. Heading out of the hairpin, very awkward approach, gets spun around by that Aston Martin, and now in a similar spot to what we saw a bit earlier on when I was worried about a driver maybe deciding to drive backwards or maybe just drive in reverse to pull back into the pit lane, and that's exactly what they did there. Now they have to be worried, of course, with that back of the wall contact. They're going to damage the back end of that car along with the damage to the front end. That's not going to help out the race too much. They do have to be worrisome though. I talked about it in reference to a spin heading out of turn number 8 not too long ago, and I'll say it once again for a spin hanging out of the hairpin as we see this close racing still in GT with the GTP right around them. There is a very easy opportunity for you to pick up a slowdown if you drive into that small little dead man zone right before pit entry. If you drive into that, iRacing will bop you, and you're going to be done for.
Going racing, pushing Vulture Motorsports all the way to the parking lot section, quite literally shoving them through the hairpin. Jack Hedgecock's not happy with Thomas Fisher at the moment. In that number 66 Porsche, I'm a bit surprised I didn't see some furious headlight flashing, but I guess there's two ways to voice displeasure. That is certainly one of them. But Hedgecock is not going to be content running in that 10th place spot after that mess.
No, not at all, and I'm seeing a little bit of damage on the back end of that car, it looks like as well. Bit of rippling. That's not going to hurt you too badly here on this racetrack, but will give a slight psychological advantage to that Ferrari right behind. Going to see that damage and think, ooh, this car is maybe struggling. This may be the point to pass. This may be the point to try and get a move done. And we are getting into the final stages of this race as well. 22 minutes and 22 seconds left on the clock. And these battles in all three of our classes are going to get intense. We still have to think about that lap traffic, though. It's a continuous factor for the GTPs trying to deal with these rolling roadblocks of GT3 cars. These GT3s got to worry about those Exocet missiles around them as well. Look at them dive around the outside through turn number 8. Contact made. This is going to end in tears if one of these drivers doesn't back out of it into the hairpin. The Porsche gonna yield. That was some brilliant action into the parking lot.
Oh, it's not done yet. Nearly took him out of the hairpin. Thomas Fisher will look to try and get the power back. And man, oh man, this race is continuing to escalate. And issues for Red Lab Competizione here. And This is a slide up over the rise at turn 5. There was already a Mustang off the road just in front, but boy, that fight for 9th place is not done yet.
Yeah, it is still on. These two still duking it out. Any sort of opportunity, and you know that that Vulture Motorsports number 64 Porsche is gonna try and pounce with the time running out as well. That just brings the aggression out more and more and more and more as the battle continues on in the GT3s. We jump to another one in GTM. This is for 5th at the moment. Superstar Racing Team running in front of the Wolf Motorsports sim racing effort. Now we saw this number 4 McLaren really slow not too long ago. The damage on the front end of that race car is nothing new. That has been the case for most of this race, but this battle is still going to be intense. You've got a McLaren and a Mercedes right around one another, still having this battle go on. Oh, look at that, a dive heading off it to turn number 9. That's not gonna work. Nearly ending up in the fence for the number 24 Grove Racing Team Porsche. I thought that was gonna be wall contact. I was pretty much resigned to it.
Double file, does it work? And he's gonna get him! A bit of smoke flies, but they're able to hold it together. And Nuno Magalhães just able to hold it underneath himself. Unitronic Fisher Motorsports also in the fight here. This is for 11th place as well. So you have 2 different fights on 2 different laps, all packed up under the same section of racetrack. Stefan Knowles and Adrian Alonso, I mentioned that fight was not going to be over yet. And speaking of fights that aren't yet over, back to the GTMs, goes around to the outside of Firestone and more contact.
Oh, man, the lap traffic now, we're starting to see the aggression get turned up in the lap traffic as well. GTPs going for moves on GT3 drivers that you won't expect at all. And that's going to be where that contact was made. Going to worry about that GTP driver arriving back to the scene of this battle here soon. That nearly took the Wolf Motorsports effort out of it entirely. And there we can see that car finally blowing their doors off into turn number 1. This may actually benefit that 515 right in tow, but the 4 gang pushed off the apex a little bit by that GTP car on the inside line. Now this battle is not done at all, and they're not alone in this fight either. You've got a massive pack of GT3 drivers. No, not massive. You still got 3 drivers, which outnumbers these 2 that are battling for that spot. They're going to maybe stick their nose into this battle as well. When you get to the end of this race, you got to consider what drivers you're battling with and what drivers are going to get involved in your battle, even though they're not battling with you.
Boy, talk about a dogfight as everything just kicked off in the GT3 field all at once, and this is what the final 40 minutes is going to do to a driver. The aggression picks up exponentially whenever you take away an extra digit in the overall timer. In this case, turning that 1 to a 0. Grow Racing Team fighting down once again. Simpson and Racing shoves the nose into Takata and is able to fend off Aiden Campbell. That was Magalhães fighting his way through into 14th.
We've been talking about the aggression and how it was going to build. It is built, and we're probably approaching a 9 or a 10 at the moment. I cannot rule out us breaking past 10 and maybe going to 11 or 12, because this is getting really hair-raising as we see fantastic shot here from around the other front right tire. 24 car. Oh my goodness.
That is naughty right there from Double Stint Racing's Chris Driver, especially for a team that has been sorry, that was Grow Racing Team that had that shot, not Double Stint Racing, but boy, that's you do not want to be playing with fire like that this late in the game.
Yeah, these racers, they're not just playing with fire. I think they're playing with fire while spraying gasoline on it. And it's only a matter of time before somebody leaves this battle with some singed eyebrows. This is getting intense. Got the GTP drivers still involved in this. Some smoke a little bit farther in the back. I think there may have been some contact with some GT3s. But, yeah, I feel like a broken record. I'm saying every single lap now that it's getting more intense. It's getting more action-packed. I said that we were coming to a point a matter of about 40 minutes ago, it felt like, when I first initially brought up this point. but it feels like these racers are kind of running on borrowed time. We've seen them battle for oh so long in this race that just a matter purely down to statistics. You can only battle oh so long before something will eventually snap. Just waiting for that snap to come, because when it does, it's going to be big.
It always is, and we nearly saw it come to blows in the Daytona 24, especially on the final lap when there was that last lap pass for the win in GT Pro. And I would not be surprised if we had a similar moment here in the opening round of the Sprint Cup in 2026. Jean Zalakis, still trying to fight it out with Chad Dalton in the 112 along with 157. Missed the fight for 5th place, GT Pro, and a big one for the Aston Martin. Dalton looks to the inside of Yen, and Rusty Spatches Racing will drop outside of the top 5.
Ooh, it's still not over yet. Side by side, 2 by 2 nearly, as they headed their way off through turn number 9. Good spot to get a move done, but very tricky to try and get it settled before they head their way off into the air. But contact made. That's going to send the 515 around it. We've got our track blocker.
And they're going to quickly get it sorted. So lucky enough that the 515 did not get put all the way through, but they're both going to be into pit road. And that was Christopher Limprecht, who was in a fight of his own. We had been watching that battle developing. Well, that's just ended 2 fights in one go.
Yeah, 2 swings of the axe. Gonna cut down 2 trees in 1 shot apiece. That is such a shame. Had very good shots to get done, but again, side-by-side racing into the hairpin, it just cannot fly. You can maybe do it in a small open wheeler, but in anything, pretty much anything larger than a dishwasher, you're going to have trouble fitting 2x2 off into the hairpin. They're kind of asking for trouble, if I'm being honest there, Nolan. That was such a shame for the 515. Innocent bystander and all that, nothing that he could have done, just a small little clip, and that's going to cause that battle to cool off right away, having to come down pit lane for the penalties there. Now in the final 15 minutes, I feel like we're still running on borrowed time. A lot of battles out there on the racetrack have been intense. That was the one that we were keeping our eyes on, and then eventually broke. Will we have something like that go on again, though, is the real question.
Well, it depends, as so many things do in these races, on how does the lap traffic fall. Whoa, hold on, and around and into the wall for one of the Vulture Motorsports drivers. That's Eric Terry Hogg. That's the M-Class leader. That's the GTM leader. And that lets Patrick Boiler through to take the point.
Yeah, this number 83 team that I don't think we've talked about it all throughout the day, they're going to inherit the lead, and that's not a recoverable situation. Huge rear suspension damage on that number 64 car, grabbing like a madman. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to pull it back into pit lane, I'll be honest. This is such a touch-and-go situation. GTP and GT3 drivers trying to blow their doors off at probably double the speed as this car is weaving around the track like a madman. Be careful on this Ferrari. They have to pull into the runoff area. They are going to pull off into the runoff area on the outside of turn number 9. A very smart call. Immediate toe back. Not sure if they got approval for that, but either way, I wouldn't fault them if they just decide to call it quits.
Well, the problem is you have some pretty harsh penalties for towing without race control approval. So if they towed without that approval, that's going to come back to haunt them later on in the game. But a tough break, and man, the old adage, right, from the penthouse to the outhouse for Eric Terry Hogg and the rest of the Vulture Motorsports crew, the GTM lead.
Yeah, I don't think they're too worried about the penalty, if I'm being honest. Having to tow back to pit lane with 12 minutes left to go and damage like that, their race was effectively over as soon as they struck the fence. And when that spin took place and I started to see how they were trying to get turned back around, that was when the mental side of things snapped. There's only so many times you can have a setback before you just decide to throw caution to the wind. And it got turned around and kind of play around in bumper cars. In the midst of that, that's a 4-car around. The one survival from that 2-car battle that we saw in GTM, they're now around. Where's the 515?
Well, unfortunately, too far back to be able to realistically capitalize. Christopher Limprecht way down the field, because remember, Limprecht got black flagged off of that, so had to immediately come down to the pit road to serve a drive-through penalty. So that is why he has been unable to capitalize on that, unfortunately. Oh, you're kidding me. Michael James has one as well. Oh boy, that fight's gonna kick off in earnest here. And in fact, because James had to flick spin the car around, that should give the spot back to Christopher Limprecht here.
I think it will. I think it very easily will, unless we cut away from this replay and see the 515 around, which that would be very unfortunate for them. But yeah, there's the contact.
What in the world was that?
Spun over the curb, got touched by the McLaren, and then hit the fence. You got to worry not only about the penalty that they are now in pit lane serving, you got to consider the damage on that car, because that was a hit on pretty much all corners of a race car that do not want to be hit.
Well, the pack going to continue to battle it out, and yet again, it is GT Pro that is starting to pick up the fight in a couple of different areas. Stefan Domes and Adrian Alonso. This is a grudge match that is yet to be decided. And you also have Chris Driver and Aiden Campbell within 0.8 of a second as well. And looking for the 515 for Wolf Motorsport Sim Racing. And sure enough, they are clear by about 15 seconds from Michael James.
Yeah, so it shows you how quickly things can change in the blink of an eye here. We're now in the final 10 minutes, or at least getting close to it. And I wonder if we've gotten all the craziness out of our system, or whether we're going to see a bit more breakout between now and the end. I can't rule it out. I can't rule out much here. This has been a wild way to get the Sprint Cup up and rolling. We said that the aggression was going to be high, especially come time for the end. But the aggression hasn't really come out in terms of gutsy moves, although we have seen that. It's just been over-aggressive driving with racers by themselves, forcing themselves into mistakes. We've seen leaders, contenders. I saw the leader in GTM run into that trouble and pretty much hand the victory, as it is looking like right now, to Patrick Bolliard and that number 83 BMW stable. But this has been a wild conclusion to what has been an overall wild race.
Jean Ziliakas continuing to fight it out with Chad Dalton for the 8th place spot in GT Pro. That realistically one of the last fights left on the racetrack, although you do have a potential fight in GTP that could look to develop. Mike Steneke and Seth Neufeld, 1.4 seconds between the two of them. This would be for 5th place and the first spot one lap down in the overall field. And it's closing quite significantly as a result of, you guessed it, lap traffic.
Now, I wonder for these GTP racers if when they go to bed tonight, they're going to have like lap traffic related like nightmares. Just seeing a car parked on the apex of turn number 5, completely blind on approach. I wouldn't blame them. You know, I'll be completely honest. We've had some pretty bad snow here in the on the east coast of the states as of recent, and quite a few nights ago, I was actually having dreams and nightmares about shoveling after I got all the other shoveling taken care of. I wish I could say I was kidding.
See, up here in Canada, that's just a regular occurrence.
I do not doubt that. One of the other Canadians I get the opportunity to work with, he's on the other west side of Canada in British Columbia, very rural part of British Columbia in what is technically a rainforest. And I was complaining to him a couple of weeks ago about the 10 inches of snow that we got here in the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I got the vibe from that interaction that he basically saw 10 inches of snow as a Wednesday.
Yeah, that's about on par, especially for the rural parts of Canada. I'm disappointed. We have not got to any snow where I live on the West Coast as well. It has been a thoroughly disappointing winter. Lots of rain, mind you. A metric ton of rain, like 2 weeks straight at one point, but no snow. Yeah, I have never had a more miserable winter.
See, the only thing that was keeping me going when I was having to shovel, it was 10 inches of like wet, slushy snow because it had frozen over. I could best compare it, as I did at the time, to basically being a creme brulee. There was a small little thin layer of ice on top of powdery snow, and it was absolute torture to try and shovel out of my car. But no, the only thing that was keeping me going during that was the memory and recollection of summer of 2025, having to mow my lawn on the hottest day of the year. I think it was 100 degrees. The feels like was closer to about 106, which it's Philly heat, so it's a mix of like dry heat and also very humid, very, very humid day. I basically felt like I was operating a lawnmower in a sauna, which I'm not sure if anyone has done that before. I may have been the first, but that was not a very pleasant experience. I would not give that fate to my worst of enemies.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I always prefer the cold, because at least in the cold you can bundle up. If you're warm, not a lot you can do about it. But we got fights on the racetrack all over the map, and the furthest one up the grid for 5th place in GTP as Seth Neufeld is all over the gearbox of Albrecht Motorsports.
And drivers looking to end off this long haul of a race on a good note. Teams who haven't had the smoothest run of things, if we are being completely honest. We've seen those two drivers run into some difficulties. I think they ran into some difficulties themselves. As look at another battle. This is in GT Pro, I believe. This is for some of the spots outside the top 5, but still battling nonetheless. Keeping our eyes on these fights out there on the racetrack as everybody begins to turn up that wick of aggression. I think we're getting into the final 4 laps of this race, roughly around that barrier right now. Probably 5 laps left to go, I would go out to say. But either way, we are in happy hour. We are most certainly in crunch time, and pretty much everybody knows that.
The problem that Seth Neufeld has right now, is the more he tries to close the gap, he loses it all in the hairpin. He can close right to the gearbox, but he's going to drop back about half a second. So realistically, he cannot make this move into turn 1. He has to make that dive somewhere else on the racetrack, but he's got to get close enough throughout the lap to be able to even realistically have an attack going. Speaking of attacks, how about Aiden Campbell and Chris Schreiber getting set to go back to war?
The fights continue all the way through to the checkered flag. The fights are going to stay hot. Stay exciting. It has been a thriller of a race here, and even with the drivers who have had setback after setback, moment after moment, take this number 57 car as a good example. As of recent here in this race, we've seen them kind of get back into the groove, but the start of this portion of the race, once we got past the halfway mark, that number 57 car was backwards more often than not. But it's all about how you end one of these endurance races. If you can make it to the very end, we were kind of joking about before we went live, actually, just this is one of those races where if you can just make it to the end, make it to the checkered flag, even if you had a lot of incidents, if you could just be there at the end without a heavily damaged race car, that would be an achievement in and of itself. Now this 57 car, they've been through the trenches today, but this will still be an achievement and something to hang their heads high on, the fact they made it to the very end.
3.5 minutes to go. And still, the battle remains for the 14th place spot in GT Pro, as well as for 10th as well. And we will cut to that fight for 10th if it gets much closer. But right now, Aiden Campbell is quicker in the corners, but that BMW just pulls away from him on the straights.
Doing everything that he needs to do to maintain that gap, playing the defensive game, and just being able to lean into the strength of that car. I always find it so bizarre how quick the BMW is on flat-out blast. It looks like a flying brick, but it has that muscle and power to pull out a big gap. And here at Long Beach, if you can defend in the places that you can get a move done the easiest, that being the straightaways and the heavy braking zones, you're golden. So even if you're feeling really sluggish and slow through the rest of the track, you can just defend well, play good defense. You can come out of this race smelling like a bed of roses. Final 2.5 minutes now. I believe that's now about 3 laps left to go. It's going to be borderline. See when Martinez is going to grab this checkered flag, but either way, holding on to a comfortable margin up at the front of the field.
Yeah, no kidding. And I do feel at this point like it will be 2 laps to go here, providing it just log another 113 this time through. Albrecht Motorsports with a lot to worry about as BMW M Team TSR with one of their cars crashed out, trying to bounce back in GTP and at least secure top 5 for the crew.
And we will find out whether this is going to be the result that they had in mind. Still enough time to battle, but the opportunity is running thin on the ground. Minute and a half now left on the clock. It has been a thriller of a race here in the first sprint race of this season here in 2026. Oh, tripped up a little bit through the hairpin. Not going to get the good exit on the driver that's trying to attack, but he is right there to pounce.
And you see him now trying to pull the old IndyCar snake down the straight, looking to break the draft. The gap's down to a quarter of a second, but he's not going to be close enough to attack in a 1, especially given the GT traffic in the way, and that could shut down the battle for good. And it is 1 lap to go at Long Beach.
Yeah, Martinez just trying to bring it home. That Cadillac, the only Cadillac running in the top 3 at the moment. It's the number 96 running in P5, the next Cadillac in that category. Haven't seen them run too well as a whole in this field, but leading the race at the moment, on track for a victory, about to head into the second sector, head their way halfway through the lap for the final time. This has been a great race for them. It has been a thriller of a drive, and looks like the main battle that we've got going on is for some of the lesser spots in our classes, as it looks like even in GT Pro, Tyler Reeden holding on to a 1-second gap may have it over Durham.
Meanwhile, Alvaro Martinez makes his way down Seaside Way for what will end up being the final time today. Just 10 seconds to go. World of Sim Racing team took the lead and they ran with it. A huge day for the top spot here for these guys. They're going to come home and take the win in the opening round of the Sprint Cup at Long Beach.
Here we go. I thought it was over. It's not. Tyler Reeden holding on now to a half-a-second margin over himself and Martinez Duran in that Acura right in tow. Got those GTP cars all around them. May have 1 or 2 more GTP competitors stick their nose in this fight, and that may give Reeden the advantage here. 0.6 of a second now as they head their way off into the final sector. I think it may be Aston Martin's win for the taking.
Trying to lurch that car through the final couple of corners. The Acura tried for a lunge, but he's not close enough. And it will be Tyler Redden who will come out of the final corner. It is victory at Long Beach for Aston Martin this afternoon. The fight for 5th still on as well. That's just been brought to a close. And then, of course, off the SS Racing's Patrick Boyler looking to take a walk-off in GTM.
Yeah, and talk about a dramatic change of events in that class. We thought it was going to go the way of a Porsche, but instead it's going to go the way of a BMW in a dramatic set of circumstances at the very end. Number 83 team going to win it in GTM at the end of the first sprint race of the year. What a way to get this sprint part of the season up and rolling. You know, I had a feeling that Long Beach was going to bring the thunder, and the thunder was brung.
Boy, that was a stellar race from start to finish this afternoon. Let's take a rundown of your official post-race results as all cars have made their way across the start-finish line. Could not have asked for a better way to have a run here this afternoon, and it is going to be Enrique Gomez bringing it home for, oh, these are the qualifying results. My apologies for that one. Here we go. The race results this afternoon, what we're actually looking for. It's World of Sim Racing teams. Alvaro Martinez bringing it home, number 1. Felipe Silveira for Delta Racing in 2nd. Then his twin turn SR with Rebecca Bornheim back in 3rd. Racegate in 4th. Albrecht Motorsports, first car 1 lap down. They managed to survive against BMW M-Team TSR and the onslaught that Seth Dufo put up in the final laps. Closing out the field, it's Red Light Competition, Bravo Snow, Shackton, and then, of course, VSCA Competition, Pax Sim Sport, a car that was running strong at the day 24. Visual Motorsports, No Limit Sim Racing Academy, and Delta Racing round out the 13-car GTP grid.
Now switching our attention off into GT Pro, where it's Blocko Motor Sim Sport grabbing the victory with Tyler Redden behind the wheel of that effort at the end of the day. The Aston Martin going to win it over the Acura. The VSR Competition car finishing right behind in P2. Virtual Power Sim Racing going to round at your podium in the GT Pro category. It's Matco Fisher Motorsports in 4th in front of the Rick Team Racing effort in 5th. It's Nicholas Sola behind the wheel of the number 68 car, finishing in front of the 66 of Thomas E. Fisher in the Vulture Motorsports entry in P7. iRacing Today Motorsports and Chad Dalton will finish in P8 in front of Jan Stelikas in the Rusty Spatulas Racing effort. A lot of these racers are one lap down to your class winner. Steven Nobez will finish right behind with World of Sim Racing Team and Adrian Alonso finishing at 11th. Go-In Racing finishing in front of Grow Racing Team with Jack Hedgecox and Nuno Magamals finishing this race in 12th and 13th respectively. Aiden Campbell with that drama towards the end going to finish in 14th place in front of Chris Drybear in P15. And Sean Hatfield with Vulture Motorsports running at your 16 cars in the GT Pro field.
And then back to the M's, it's Patrick Boiler for Off of the SS Racing alongside Tim McLeish for Restaurant Motorsports, the only 2 cars to finish on the lead lap in GTM. Following them, it's Wastegate Racing and SRM Motorsports. Wolf Motorsports Sim Racing back in 5th with Intercom Fisher Motorsports in 6th. Superstar Racing, Blocko Motori, Sim Sport, Rentley, SRT, and SWF Motorsports will look to close out the top 10. With the likes of Sam Vaughn and BMW M Team TSR back in 11th. Go-In Racing in 12th. Frida Sport in 6th. Vulture Motorsports, a tough day for Vulture at the office overall, down in 14th. Flight Level Racing in 15th. And Errors Racing did not make it to the checkered flag in this one. All of that takes us to the end of what was an absolute dogfight here this afternoon. Let's get a chance to get a chit-chat in here with the drivers that finished number 1 throughout your classes here this afternoon. Well, let's kick things off first and foremost. Typically, we would start with the GTPs, but it does not look like Martinez is available at the moment. So instead, we'll begin with Tyler Redden here, the driver that brought home Blocko Motori's first win of the season here in terms of points race contention. Tyler, what a fight at the end, having to fend off Sergio Martinez Duran for VSR Competition. Talk us through the final laps there, because that was a bit of a close one.
It was very stressful. The back markers didn't make it easy, I'm not going to lie, but it was very fun. I'm shaking a little bit, but it was great fun. But man, yeah, the back markers did not make it easy to let me by very, very quickly. All good fun though.
Kind of talk us through the race overall, because it seemed like just a race of attrition throughout, as Long Beach it so often is, but remarkably clean, I guess you could say, by full course yellow stands, with only 1 around the middle portion of the race.
Yeah, we actually we expected the first half of the race just to be under full course yellow, which is why my teammate was in first, and it was remarkably clean. Besides like a bunch of scary incidents, I was almost in one. I don't remember which lap, but turn 1 there was a big pileup that I barely managed to miss without getting any damage. But it was tough, very tough. So easy to make a mistake here.
You're able to walk it off, and you guys were looking strong at Daytona as well. I mean, you were running up at the front in the podium positions for so much of the Makona Setup Shop 24 Hours of Daytona, so it's clear that your team has a lot of pace underneath it. Do you reckon you can bounce back in the Endurance Cup when we roll out to Sebring in a few weeks here?
Oh, for sure. I think on raw pace, our team is the best on the grid. It's just whether we get lucky or not with traffic and how safety cars goes. And yeah, last month at Daytona was very tough. I felt like my pace was very good, but just a very unlucky incident at the end of the race wound up really putting us back. But we're very confident for the rest of the season for the Endurance Cup and Sprint Cup that we can claw back and hopefully eke out a win in both championships.
Well, we'll wish you the best of luck then in a few weeks when we roll back down to Florida. Congratulations on taking the win in GT Pro this afternoon. A hard-fought win at that. And we'll hopefully see you again in a few weeks here.
All right, thank you very much.
Tyler Redden comes home number 1 this afternoon. And, well, Ron, we have our GTM winners standing by as well. Matthew Elia standing by for Off of the SS Racing. You got our GTM winners this afternoon.
Yeah, Matthew Ella now joining us here in the booth. Matthew, welcome in. Congratulations on the fantastic run in the GTM category. Want to ask you about the end of this race because, I mean, it kind of looked like it was going to be P2 for you and the team at the very end, but dramatic series of events in the final few moments going to give you all the victory. How was it just trying to stay on top of things here at Long Beach today?
I think we felt pretty good about possibly getting P1 in the grand scheme of things. We were gaining on the Vulture car until he spun, so it was all just down to the SRN car behind. We tried to keep the gap as big as we could just in case traffic came along, so it all worked out pretty well in the end.
Certainly works out well, grabbing the victory here at Long Beach. Want to ask you about the thoughts on this race. You know, going from the high banks of Daytona and the open nature of that circuit in a 24-hour-long race to a 2-hour and 40-minute-long sprint on the tight confines of a street circuit like here at Long Beach. That accounts to whiplash. My neck was hurting just thinking about how much of a change that is. So how was it just trying to get on top of things here with this race?
For me personally, it was pretty hard because I have not ran this track in like 2-3 years. It's one of my most despised tracks. So when my partner had me get into it, he talked me through it, got me ready for this race. But it is a totally different beast compared to Daytona. It is being so short, instead of waiting until Sebring, then going to Long Beach, having it right after Daytona is just, you got to be ready already, and it's just a totally different thing.
Yeah, a whole different kettle of fish here at Long Beach, but we're going to be having a different kind of racetrack in a couple of weeks' time when the series returns. Sebring in 3 weeks' time for the 12-hour. What are your thoughts heading off to round number 3 of the season?
Oh, Sebring is probably one of our best tracks. As a team, we all love it. We have very good pace there as well. Probably would have had a podium last year, except for some circumstances with car damage. But we're excited for it. We're so ready to get back in the car and try to get that one that we feel was probably stolen from us last year.
Well, if you're feeling good about your chances, the momentum's going to be on your side with a win here in Long Beach. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us here in the booth. Congratulations to you and the team on the victory here, and we'll see you in 3 weeks' time when the series rocks up to Sebring.
All right, thank you.
And that right there was Matthew Ella, our winner in the GTM category. And Nolan, I'll pass it back off to you to have a chat with our overall winners.
It is 8X Martinez Sanchez, the representative from World of Sim Racing, coming up here to give us a chat here from the WSR camp. And a big day for you guys as you're able to take a walk-off win by 8.5 seconds, the biggest gap we had in any class win on the field this afternoon. So it's got to feel good to get that Cadillac back on top.
Yes, it was a nice race. I couldn't see at full of race, but I couldn't race this time because my mates were so fast. As you could see, the race was very well. We had a bit luck because of that incident with first and second GTP, and we are happy.
I imagine you are. I mean, you guys are a team that has frequently been up at the top of the boards in endurance races all across iRacing here. So safe to say that car has returned to the top form. Do you reckon you guys can go at it to try and gun for the GTP championship?
Yeah, I think we are in a good place. We are working hard. Last week we tried hard finding the gaps. And I think we are doing a good job. Good work.
12 hours of Sebring is just around the corner. It's the second longest race of the season, and one that will be, of course, racing into the darkness as well. What's going to be the game plan as you get set to swim back out to Florida?
The same. We need to work hard. I expected very work. We need to work hard. I like Sebring. They like Sebring. We like Sebring. we will compete.
Well, we'll wish you the best of luck then in a few weeks when we roll it back out to Florida. Congratulations on taking home #1, and we'll see you next time out.
Thank you.
That's Adax Martinez Sanchez coming home winners of GTP this afternoon. And, well, that's going to be it then for us here, Ron, this afternoon. Quite the battle that we had, especially in the closing moments there. That race was frankly stellar, and I think a lot of this field are going to be happy with the results. Others might look to put this race in the rearview mirror, but whatever the case, it's yet another race in the books.
As much as there's one section of the racing community that always looks forward to Long Beach, there's another that always absolutely hates it. Same kind of deal leaving this race. Others going to be a little bit upset to see this track in their rearview mirror. Others going to be absolutely thrilled, but they still have a hard test in 3 weeks' time. The Sebring 12 hours. As much as the attention is always on the Daytona 24 and the storied event that it is, Sebring to me is always just as much, if not even more of a test than the Daytona 24. Maybe half the length of that track packs a punch. So when the series returns here to Green Flag TV in 3 weeks' time, all of you tuning into these shows are going to be in for a good one.
Well, we may be done racing this afternoon, but not today, as we got the FTR events of the Beer League teaming up for a no-track limits all-out brawl at Virginia International Raceway on Saturday, alongside the SRA IL Truck Series at Phoenix. The Precision Automobile Club Esports takes out to Zolder on Sunday, followed by the Collegiate iRacing League Cup Series at the Rockingham Speedway on Monday. They'll be alongside High Tide Racing League down at Sonoma. Mid-Atlantic Racers also get set to conquer Avondale, Arizona. Meanwhile, Ominous Thrill will also be running at The Rock on Tuesday. If you want to find out more about who we are and what we can offer you, check us out today at www.greenflag.tv. I'm Nolan Rebel alongside Ron Mounds. A stellar race this afternoon, and we'll see you all when we go racing once more on Green Flag TV.